A millionaire finds a poor girl unconscious in his park. He decides to take her to live in his mansion. However, one day, he decides to come home early to surprise the girl. The millionaire is completely shocked when he sees what the girl did to his disabled wife. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The sun had just begun to set, casting long shadows across the immaculately manicured lawns of Evergreen Park. As the last visitors made their way toward the ornate iron gates, a solitary figure remained behind, hidden beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient oak tree. Unbeknownst to the departing families and couples, this figure was about to set in motion a series of events that would change lives forever. Maxwell Thornton, the park's owner and one of the city's wealthiest residents, strolled along the winding paths, savoring the tranquility of the approaching evening. His tailored suit and polished shoes seemed at odds with the natural surroundings, but his relaxed demeanor suggested he was perfectly at home among the flowers and trees he'd cultivated for years. As he rounded a bend, something caught his eye, a small crumpled form beneath the oak tree. Curiosity piqued, Maxwell approached cautiously. His breath caught in his throat as he realized it was a young girl, no more than 12 or 13, lying unconscious on the ground. "Hello?" he called out, his voice tinged with concern. "Are you all right?" Receiving no response, Maxwell knelt beside the girl, his manicured hands hovering uncertainly over her slight frame. Her clothes were tattered and dirty, her face smudged with grime. It was clear she hadn't eaten or bathed in days. Maxwell's heart clenched with an unfamiliar emotion, a mixture of pity and an overwhelming desire to help. Without hesitation, he scooped the girl into his arms, marveling at how little she weighed. As he carried her towards the park's exit, he couldn't help but wonder about the circumstances that had led her to this moment. What hardships had she endured? Where was her family? The short drive to Maxwell's mansion was a blur of worried thoughts and hasty plans. As his chauffeur navigated the city streets, Maxwell cradled the girl gently, ensuring she was as comfortable as possible in the back of his luxury sedan. Upon arriving at the Thornton estate, a flurry of activity ensued. Maxwell barked orders to his startled staff, demanding clean clothes, warm blankets, and a hot meal be prepared immediately. The household sprang into action, their usual decorum forgotten in the face of their employer's urgent demands. As the girl was carefully placed in one of the mansion's many guest rooms, Maxwell found himself pacing anxiously outside the door. He'd called for a doctor, of course, but the wait seemed interminable. What if she was seriously ill? What if she didn't wake up? Hours passed, and as the first rays of dawn began to peek through the windows, Maxwell heard a soft stirring from within the room. Hesitantly, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The girl was awake, her eyes wide with fear and confusion as she took in her unfamiliar surroundings. When her gaze fell on Maxwell, she shrank back against the headboard, pulling the plush comforter up to her chin like a shield. "It's all right," Maxwell said softly, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. "You're safe here. I found you in the park and brought you to my home. How are you feeling?" The girl remained silent, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. Maxwell's heart ached at the sight of her obvious distress. "My name is Maxwell," he continued, keeping his voice low and soothing. "What's your name?" After a long moment of silence, the girl whispered, "Lily." Maxwell smiled encouragingly. "It's nice to meet you, Lily. Are you hungry? I can have some food brought up if you'd like." At the mention of food, Lily's stomach gave an audible growl. A faint blush colored her cheeks, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. As Maxwell turned to call for a maid, Lily's voice stopped him. Why did you help me?" The question caught him off guard. Why had he helped her? It had been an instinctive decision, one he hadn't questioned in the moment. Now, faced with Lily's wary gaze, Maxwell searched for the right words. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "No one should have to sleep in a park, especially not a young girl like yourself. I have the means to help, so I did." Lily's brow furrowed as she processed his words. It was clear she wasn't used to such kindness from strangers. Maxwell's heart broke a little more as he wondered what circumstances had led her to be so distrustful. Over the next few days, Lily slowly began to open up. She devoured the meals brought to her room, each bite seeming to bring a little more color to her cheeks. Maxwell visited her regularly, sometimes just sitting quietly while she ate, other times engaging her in gentle conversation. He learned that she had run away from a difficult home life, though she remained vague about the details. The park had become her sanctuary, a place where she could lose herself among the trees and forget for a little while the hardships she'd left behind. As Lily regained her strength, Maxwell found himself growing increasingly attached to the quiet, thoughtful girl. He marveled at her resilience, at the spark of intelligence that shone in her eyes despite all she'd been through. One afternoon, about a week after he'd found her, Maxwell broached the subject that had been weighing on his mind. "Lily," he began carefully, "I've been thinking, would you like to stay here? Not just for now, but permanently." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "You mean live here with you?" Maxwell nodded. "Yes. I know it's a big decision, and I understand if you need time to think about it, but I want you to know that you're welcome here, for as long as you want to stay." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, and for a moment, Maxwell feared he'd overstepped. But then she launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. "Thank you so much." As Maxwell returned the embrace, he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. He'd always thought he had everything he could ever want: wealth, success, a beautiful home. But now, with this small, brave girl in his arms, he realized there had been a void in his life he hadn't even known existed. Little did Maxwell know, as he stood there in the sunlit room with Lily, that his decision to help a stranger would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about family, love, and the true meaning of wealth. The journey ahead would be filled with joy and heartache, laughter and tears, as Lily's presence in the Thornton household began to unravel long-held secrets and force confrontations with the past. But for now, in this moment of pure connection, Maxwell simply held on tight, silently vowing to give Lily the love and security she so desperately deserved. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the room, a new chapter in both their lives had begun, one that would change them, and those around them, in ways they could never have imagined. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 7 times, its deep resonant tones echoing through the cavernous halls of the Thornton mansion. Vivian Thornton, impeccably dressed in a tailored Chanel suit, stepped through the front door, her stiletto heels clicking against the marble floor. She'd just returned from a grueling day of meetings and charity luncheons, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair slightly wilted from the summer heat. "Maxwell?" she called out, her voice carrying a hint of irritation. It wasn't like her husband to be absent when she returned home. Usually he'd be waiting in his study, ready to pour her a glass of Chardonnay and listen to her recount the day's events. As Vivian made her way towards the grand staircase, a small figure darted across her path, nearly causing her to lose her balance. She let out a startled gasp, her hand flying to her chest. "What on earth?" she exclaimed, her blue eyes widening as she took in the sight before her. A young girl, no more than 12 or 13, stood frozen in the middle of the foyer. She was dressed in clothes that were clearly too large for her slight frame. One of Maxwell's old shirts hung nearly to her knees, and a pair of rolled-up sweatpants threatened to slip off her hips at any moment. Her dark hair was damp, as if she'd just emerged from the shower, and her feet were bare against the cool marble floor. For a moment, the two stood in stunned silence, sizing each other up. Vivian's mind raced, trying to make sense of the scene. Who was this child? How had she gotten into their home? Before Vivian could form the words to demand an explanation, Maxwell appeared at the top of the stairs, his face breaking into a warm smile at the sight of his wife. "Ah, Vivian, you're home. I see you've met Lily," he said, descending the stairs with an ease that suggested nothing was out of the ordinary. Vivian's eyes narrowed as she turned to face her husband. "Maxwell," she said, her voice deceptively calm, "would you care to explain why there's a child in our home, and why she appears to be wearing your clothes?" Maxwell reached the bottom of the stairs and placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. The girl flinched slightly at the touch but didn't pull away, her eyes darting nervously between Maxwell and Vivian. "Darling, this is Lily. I found her in the park last week, unconscious and alone. She's been staying with us while she recovers," Maxwell explained, his tone matter-of-fact, as if taking in stray children was a regular occurrence in their household. Vivian's perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "You found her in the park? Maxwell, what were you thinking? We can't just take in random children off the street." Lily shrunk back at Vivian's words, her small frame seeming to collapse in on itself. Maxwell's hand tightened protectively on her shoulder. "Vivian, please," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Can we discuss this in private?" With a curt nod, Vivian turned on her heel and strode towards Maxwell's study, her back ramrod straight. Maxwell gave Lily's shoulder a reassuring squeeze before following his wife, closing the door behind them with a soft click. Left alone in the foyer, Lily stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the muffled sounds of an argument coming from behind the closed door. Vivian's voice rising in pitch, Maxwell's deeper tones trying to soothe and explain. Lily's mind raced with panic. She should have known it was too good to be true. Of course, Maxwell's wife wouldn't want her here. She was nothing but a burden, a stray dog brought in from the cold. Maybe it would be better if she just left now, before they had a chance to throw her out. But as she turned towards the front door, her eyes fell on a vase of fresh flowers sitting on a nearby table. The blooms were vibrant and perfectly arranged, their sweet scent filling the air. Without thinking, Lily reached out and gently touched one of the soft petals. In that moment, a memory surfaced. Her mother, years ago, tending to a small window box of geraniums in their tiny apartment. It had been one of the few bright spots in their otherwise dreary home. Lily remembered how carefully her mother had watered those plants, how she'd spoken to them in soft, loving tones. Blinking back tears, Lily made a decision. She couldn't leave, not yet. Maxwell had shown her kindness when she needed it most. The least she could do was try to repay that kindness, to show that she wasn't just a burden. With determined steps, Lily made her way to the kitchen. She'd noticed earlier that it was equipped with every modern convenience imaginable, but what caught her eye now was a small watering can sitting on the windowsill above the sink. Filling the can with water, Lily began to move through the house, carefully tending to each arrangement of flowers she came across. She worked quietly, methodically, losing herself in the task. It was soothing, this simple act of care, and it gave her something to focus on other than the continued sounds of discussion coming from Maxwell's study. As she worked, Lily couldn't help but marvel at the opulence surrounding her. The Thornton mansion was unlike anything she'd ever seen before. Crystal chandeliers, priceless artworks, furniture that looked too delicate to actually use. It was a far cry from the rundown apartments and crowded shelters she was used to. Yet despite all the luxury, there was something missing. The house felt cold somehow, impersonal, like a museum rather than a home. Lily thought of the small, cluttered apartment she'd shared with her mother, how it had been full of warmth despite their poverty. She wondered if Vivian and Maxwell ever felt the emptiness of their grand rooms, the echo of their footsteps in the long hallways. Lost in her thoughts, Lily didn't notice when the study door opened. She was kneeling by a particularly large arrangement in the living room, carefully removing a few wilted leaves, when a shadow fell across her. Looking up, she found Vivian standing over her, an unreadable expression on her face. Lily scrambled to her feet, nearly knocking over the watering can in her haste. "I'm sorry," she blurted out, her voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to help, to do something useful." Vivian's eyes moved from Lily to the flowers and back again. For a long moment she said nothing, and Lily braced herself for anger, for rejection. But when Vivian finally spoke, her voice was softer than Lily expected. "You have a gentle touch with the flowers," she said. "Not many people know how to care for them properly." Lily blinked in surprise. "My mum, she used to grow flowers. She taught me how to take care of them." Something flickered in Vivian's eyes, a flash of emotion so quick Lily wasn't sure she'd really seen it. Then Vivian's face settled back into its usual composed mask. "Well," she said, smoothing down her already perfect hair, "I suppose if you're to stay here, we'll need to find you some proper clothes. We can't have you running around in Maxwell's old things." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing amid the flowers, hope blooming tentatively in her chest. It wasn't acceptance, not quite, but it was a start. As Lily watched Vivian's retreating form, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the elegant woman than met the eye. There was a sadness there, hidden beneath the polished exterior, a loneliness that resonated with Lily's own. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Lily felt a spark of something beyond gratitude towards Maxwell. She felt a sense of purpose. Maybe, just maybe, she could bring some warmth to this cold, beautiful house. Maybe she could help heal whatever wounds lay hidden beneath the surface of the Thornton family. It would be a challenge, Lily knew. Vivian's initial reaction had made that clear, but as she looked around at the flowers she'd tended, at the little touches of care she'd already added to the house, Lily felt a surge of determination. She might be small, she might be out of place in this world of wealth and privilege, but she wasn't powerless. She had love to give, and maybe that was exactly what this family needed. As the evening sun cast long shadows through the windows, Lily picked up the watering can once more. There were more flowers to tend to, more small acts of kindness to perform. The days that followed Lily's arrival at the Thornton mansion were filled with a tentative dance of adjustment. Like ripples spreading across a still pond, her presence began to subtly alter the rhythms of the household, touching lives in ways both small and profound. For Maxwell, the changes were immediate and joyful. He found himself lingering over breakfast, eager to hear about Lily's plans for the day. His usual routine of rushing off to the office was replaced by leisurely walks through the garden, Lily's small hand tucked into his as she pointed out newly blooming flowers or interesting insects. "Look, Maxwell," Lily exclaimed one morning, her eyes wide with wonder. "A butterfly just came out of its chrysalis." Maxwell knelt beside her, watching as the delicate creature unfurled its wings for the first time. In that moment, seeing the world through Lily's eyes, he felt a sense of awe he hadn't experienced in years. "It's beautiful," he murmured, glancing at Lily's rapt expression. "Just like you, my dear." A blush colored Lily's cheeks at his words, but her smile was radiant. For Maxwell, these quiet moments of connection were precious beyond measure. They filled a void he hadn't even realized existed in his life, bringing a warmth and purpose to his days that no business success could match. Vivian, on the other hand, found the adjustment more challenging. She was a woman accustomed to order and control, her days meticulously planned and executed with precision. Lily's presence introduced an element of unpredictability that left her feeling off balance and uncertain. Yet even Vivian couldn't remain entirely immune to Lily's gentle influence. She found herself pausing in her usual whirlwind of activity to observe the girl's quiet determination as she tended to the flowers or helped the staff with small tasks around the house. One afternoon, as Vivian was preparing to leave for a charity board meeting, she caught sight of Lily carefully polishing the silver in the dining room. The girl's face was a study in concentration, her small hands moving with a care and precision that belied her young age. "You missed a spot," Vivian said, her voice causing Lily to start slightly. Instead of shrinking away, as she might have done in the early days, Lily looked up with a small smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton. I'll make sure to get it." Vivian watched as Lily diligently repolished the piece, her work thorough and meticulous. Something stirred in Vivian's chest, a memory, perhaps, of her own younger self, eager to please and prove her worth. "You're doing a fine job, Lily," Vivian said softly, surprising herself with the warmth in her voice. "Thank you for your help." The smile that lit up Lily's face at the simple praise was like a burst of sunlight, momentarily chasing away the shadows that had long resided in Vivian's heart. As she turned to leave, Vivian found herself moving a little slower, her usual haste tempered by a new awareness of the small moments of beauty that surrounded her. But it wasn't just the Thorntons who felt the effects of Lily's presence. The staff, initially wary of this unexpected addition to the household, soon found themselves charmed by her eagerness to help and her genuine interest in their lives. Maria, the head housekeeper who had served the Thorntons for over 2 decades, took Lily under her wing. She showed the girl how to properly make a bed with hospital corners, taught her the secret to getting stubborn stains out of linens, and regaled her with stories of the mansion's history. "You see that chandelier?" Maria said one day, pointing to the massive crystal fixture in the ballroom. "It's been here since the house was built over 100 years ago. They say it was a gift from a European prince." Lily's eyes widened in awe. "Really? Have you ever seen it lit up for a party?" Maria chuckled, a faraway look in her eyes. "Oh yes, many times, but it's been years since the Thorntons hosted a real celebration here. These days it's all business dinners and charity galas." A thoughtful expression crossed Lily's face. "That's sad." Such a beautiful room should be filled with laughter and dancing, don't you think? Maria patted Lily's shoulder affectionately. You're right about that, little one. Maybe someday it will be again. As the weeks passed, Lily's presence continued to work its subtle magic on the household. The staff moved through their duties with a newfound spring in their step, often pausing to exchange a kind word or a smile with the young girl. Even the most taciturn of servants found themselves softening in the face of Lily's genuine warmth and curiosity. Maxwell, too, found his world expanding in unexpected ways. He began to see his wealth and privilege through new eyes, noticing things he had long taken for granted. The extravagant meals prepared by their private chef, the fleet of luxury cars sitting idle in the garage, the closets overflowing with designer clothes. All of it seemed somehow excessive in light of Lily's simple needs and grateful heart. One evening, as Maxwell sat in his study reviewing quarterly reports, Lily appeared in the doorway, her expression hesitant. "Maxwell," she said softly, "can I ask you something?" He set aside his papers immediately, giving her his full attention. "Of course, Lily. What's on your mind?" She twisted her hands nervously in the hem of her shirt, a new one bought by Vivian in a rare shopping excursion. "I was wondering, there are so many empty rooms in the house, and so much food that sometimes gets thrown away. Do you think, could we maybe help other kids like me? Kids who don't have anywhere to go?" Maxwell felt his heart swell with a mixture of pride and humility. Here was this child, who had so little for so long, thinking not of herself, but of others in need. "That's a wonderful idea, Lily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Why don't we sit down tomorrow and talk about how we might be able to do that?" Lily's face lit up with joy, and she rushed forward to throw her arms around Maxwell in a spontaneous hug. As he held her close, Maxwell felt a sense of purpose settling over him. He had always considered himself a successful man, but Lily was teaching him that true wealth lay not in bank accounts or business deals, but in the ability to make a difference in the lives of others. As Lily skipped off to bed, her heart light with the promise of helping others, Maxwell found himself looking at his life with new eyes. The mansion that had once seemed a symbol of his success now felt too large, too empty. The business empire he had built with such single-minded focus suddenly seemed less important in the face of Lily's simple wisdom and compassion. He thought of the park where he had found Lily, of the other children who might be out there right now, alone and afraid. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt a stirring of real excitement, a sense of a new chapter beginning. Little did he know that this small seed of an idea, planted by a child's innocent question, would grow into something that would change not just their lives, but the lives of countless others in their community. As the grandfather clock in the hall chimed the late hour, Maxwell closed his laptop, the business reports forgotten. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to see the world through Lily's eyes. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Maxwell Thornton went to bed not as a tired businessman, but as a man filled with hope and purpose, eager to see what the new day would bring. The summer sun beat down relentlessly on the manicured lawns of the Thornton estate, the air heavy with the scent of roses and freshly cut grass. Inside the cool confines of the mansion, Vivian Thornton stood before the full-length mirror in her dressing room, her reflection a study in elegance and poise. But today, something was different. As she smoothed down the front of her designer dress, Vivian's hands trembled ever so slightly. Her eyes, usually sharp and focused, held a hint of uncertainty, a shadow of something that looked almost like fear. "Mrs. Thornton?" Maria's voice called softly from the doorway. "The car is ready whenever you are." Vivian took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Thank you, Maria. I'll be down in a moment." As the housekeeper's footsteps faded away, Vivian allowed herself one more moment of vulnerability. Her gaze drifted to a small, ornate box on her dressing table. With hesitant fingers, she opened it, revealing a delicate silver locket nestled on a bed of velvet. For a long moment, Vivian stared at the locket, her mind awash with memories she'd long tried to suppress. Then, with a barely audible sigh, she snapped the box shut and turned away. Some ghosts, it seemed, refused to stay buried. Downstairs, Lily was in the kitchen, perched on a stool as she watched the chef prepare lunch. Her eyes widened in delight as he deftly flipped a pancake high into the air, catching it neatly in the pan. "Wow!" she exclaimed. "Can you teach me how to do that?" The chef, a usually stern-faced man named Henri, couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. "Perhaps, little one. But first, you must learn the basics. Would you like to help me mix the batter for the next batch?" Lily nodded eagerly, hopping down from her stool. As she carefully measured out flour and milk under Henri's watchful eye, she heard the click of heels on tile. Vivian appeared in the doorway, looking as immaculate as ever, in a pale blue dress and matching jacket. "Lily," she said, her voice carrying a note of forced cheerfulness, "I'm heading out for a while. Be good for Maria and the staff, all right?" "Yes, Mrs. Thornton," Lily replied, then hesitated for a moment before adding, "Have a nice day." A flicker of something. Surprise? Guilt? Passed across Vivian's face before her usual composed mask slipped back into place. With a nod to Henri and a last glance at Lily, she turned and left, the sound of her heels fading as she made her way to the waiting car. As the sleek black sedan pulled out of the driveway, Vivian closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of quiet before the storm that lay ahead. The drive into the city passed in a blur of familiar streets and buildings, each mile bringing her closer to a confrontation she'd been dreading for weeks. Finally, the car pulled up in front of a nondescript office building. Vivian stepped out, her designer heels clicking against the pavement as she made her way inside. The receptionist, a young woman with a sympathetic smile, directed her to a waiting room. "Dr. Evelyn will be with you shortly, Mrs. Thornton," she said softly. Vivian nodded, taking a seat in one of the plush chairs. Her fingers idly traced the outline of the locket hidden in her jacket pocket, a nervous habit she thought she'd long since abandoned. "Vivian?" A gentle voice broke through her reverie. "I'm ready for you now." Dr. Evelyn Stevens, a woman in her mid-50s with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, stood in the doorway of her office. Vivian rose, following her into the warmly lit room with its comfortable chairs and soothing artwork. As Vivian settled into her seat, Dr. Evelyn leaned forward, her expression compassionate. "How have you been, Vivian? It's been quite a while since our last session." Vivian's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. I'm not sure, Evelyn. Everything's changed. There's a girl living in our house now. Maxwell found her, brought her home, and Her voice trailed off, the words catching in her throat. Dr. Evelyn waited patiently, giving Vivian the space to gather her thoughts. "She reminds me so much of her," Vivian finally whispered. Her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. "Every time I look at her, I remember." Dr. Evelyn nodded encouragingly. "Tell me about her, Vivian, about the girl Maxwell brought home." And so, haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency, Vivian began to speak. She told Dr. Evelyn about finding Lily in the foyer that first day, about the girl's gentle way with the flowers, her eagerness to help around the house. She spoke of the way Maxwell's face lit up when Lily was around, of the laughter that now echoed through halls that had long been silent. "She's changing everything, Evelyn," Vivian said, her voice a mixture of wonder and fear. "The staff adores her. Maxwell, I've never seen him like this. He's talking about using the company's resources to help other children in need. And you?" Dr. Evelyn prompted gently. Vivian's hand went to her pocket, fingers closing around the locket. "I don't know how to feel. Part of me wants to embrace her, to love her the way Maxwell does. But every time I try, I remember." With trembling hands, Vivian withdrew the locket, holding it out to Dr. Evelyn. The therapist took it carefully, opening it to reveal a tiny photograph of a newborn baby, its features barely discernible. "Oh, Vivian," Dr. Evelyn breathed, understanding dawning in her eyes. "She would have been about Lily's age now," Vivian said, her voice barely above a whisper. If I'd made a different choice." The tears she'd been holding back for so long finally spilled over, coursing down her cheeks in silent rivulets. Dr. Evelyn moved to sit beside her, placing a comforting hand on her arm. "Vivian, listen to me," she said firmly. "The choice you made all those years ago, it doesn't define you. You were young, scared, in an impossible situation. You did what you thought was best at the time." Vivian shook her head, her voice choked with emotion. "But what if it wasn't? What if I made the wrong choice? Seeing Lily, seeing how happy she makes Maxwell, I can't help but wonder what might have been." Dr. Evelyn squeezed Vivian's hand gently. "We can't change the past, Vivian, but we can learn from it, grow from it. This girl, Lily. She's not a replacement for the baby you gave up. She's her own person with her own story. Maybe she's come into your life for a reason." Vivian looked up, her tear-stained face a mask of confusion. "What do you mean?" "Perhaps this is an opportunity," Dr. Evelyn suggested. "A chance to heal old wounds, to open your heart in a way you haven't allowed yourself to do in years. Lily needs love, acceptance, and from what you've told me, it sounds like you and Maxwell might need her just as much." As Vivian left Dr. Evelyn's office an hour later, her mind was a whirl with conflicting emotions. The weight of her secret, carried for so many years, felt both heavier and lighter. Heavier because facing it had brought all the pain and regret rushing back. Lighter because for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope, a possibility of redemption. The drive back to the mansion seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. As the car pulled into the driveway, Vivian caught sight of a small figure darting among the rose bushes. Lily, her dark hair flying behind her, was chasing a butterfly, her face alight with joy and wonder. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Thornton estate as Maxwell's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out, briefcase in hand, his mind still buzzing with the day's meetings and negotiations. But as he walked towards the house, a sound caught his attention. Laughter, light and carefree, floating on the warm summer air. Following the sound, Maxwell rounded the corner of the house to find a sight that stopped him in his tracks. There, in the middle of Vivian's prized rose garden, was his wife, her usually immaculate hair slightly mussed, her designer clothes smudged with dirt. And beside her, eyes shining with delight, was Lily. The two were on their knees, hands deep in the rich soil, planting what looked like a row of seedlings. Vivian was saying something, her voice too low for Maxwell to hear, and Lily was nodding earnestly, hanging on every word. For a moment, Maxwell simply stood there, drinking in the scene. It was so unexpected, so wonderfully ordinary, that he felt a lump form in his throat. This was what he had hoped for when he brought Lily home. Not just to give her a place to stay, but to bring life and warmth back into their home. "Well, what do we have here?" he called out, unable to keep the smile from his voice. Both Vivian and Lily looked up, startled. Lily's face broke into a wide grin. "Maxwell, look what we're doing, Mrs. Thornton is teaching me how to plant sunflowers." Vivian stood, brushing the dirt from her hands. There was a softness in her eyes that Maxwell hadn't seen in years. "I thought, well, Lily mentioned she'd never grown anything before, and the kitchen garden could use some brightening up." Maxwell set down his briefcase and moved closer, examining the neat row of tiny green shoots. "It looks wonderful. Though I have to say I'm a bit surprised to see you out here, Vivian. I thought you'd sworn off gardening after the great tomato disaster of '09. A small chuckle escaped Vivian's lips. "Yes, well, sometimes it's worth giving things another try." Her eyes met Maxwell's, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. This was about more than just flowers. Lily, oblivious to the undercurrents of adult emotion, tugged at Maxwell's sleeve. "Can I show you the rest of the garden? Mrs. Thornton says we can plant vegetables too, and maybe even build a little greenhouse." "That sounds wonderful, Lily," Maxwell said, ruffling her hair affectionately. "Why don't you go wash up and then you can tell me all about your plans over dinner?" As Lily scampered off towards the house, Maxwell turned to Vivian. "This is unexpected," he said softly. "But wonderful. What brought this on?" Vivian's gaze followed Lily's retreating form, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Maxwell. About the past, about the future, and I realized I've been holding myself back for too long, afraid to open up, to care too deeply. But seeing you with Lily, seeing how she's changed our home, I want to be a part of that." Maxwell reached out, taking Vivian's dirt-smudged hand in his own. "I'm glad," he said simply. "I've missed you, Viv. The real you, not the society wife you've been pretending to be for so long." Vivian squeezed his hand, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I've missed me too," she whispered. As they walked back to the house together, Maxwell felt a sense of hope blooming in his chest. It was as if the seeds Lily and Vivian had planted weren't just in the garden, but in their hearts as well. Something new was growing here, something precious and fragile but full of promise. Over dinner that night, Lily chattered excitedly about her gardening plans, her enthusiasm infectious. Maxwell found himself swept up in her vision of a vibrant kitchen garden, complete with a rainbow of vegetables and a butterfly-friendly flower patch. "And Mrs. Thornton says we can donate extra vegetables to the local food bank," Lily said, her eyes shining. "Isn't that great? We can help feed people who don't have enough to eat." Maxwell glanced at Vivian, surprised. His wife had never shown much interest in charity work beyond writing the occasional check, but now she was nodding, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's a wonderful idea, Lily," Vivian said. "In fact, I was thinking perhaps we could do even more. The east wing of the house has been empty for years. What if we turned it into a sort of community center? A place where children from less fortunate backgrounds could come for tutoring, or art classes, or just a safe place to spend time after school." Maxwell felt his heart swell with pride and love. This was the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. Compassionate, creative, always looking for ways to make the world a little better. Somehow Lily had helped bring that woman back to the surface. "That's an incredible idea, Vivian," he said warmly. "We could partner with local schools, maybe set up a scholarship program. I'm sure the company could spare some resources to get it off the ground." As they continued to discuss ideas, growing more excited with each passing moment, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the change in their family dynamic. For years, dinners had been quiet affairs, with he and Vivian barely exchanging more than a few words about their respective days. Now the dining room was filled with laughter, with dreams of the future, with a sense of shared purpose. Later that evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with visions of sunflowers dancing in her head, Maxwell found Vivian in their bedroom, sitting at her vanity. She was holding something in her hand, staring at it with an unreadable expression. "Viv?" he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Is everything all right?" Vivian turned, and Maxwell saw that she was holding a small silver locket. His breath caught in his throat. He recognized it, though he hadn't seen it in years. It was the locket Vivian had bought when... "I think it's time I told you something, Maxwell," Vivian said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Maxwell sat down on the edge of the bed, his heart racing. He had always known there was something Vivian was holding back, some pain she carried that she never shared. Now, it seemed, the moment of truth had arrived. Vivian took a deep breath, then began to speak. She told him about her past, about the baby she had given up for adoption long before they met, about the guilt and regret she had carried all these years, the walls she had built around her heart to protect herself from ever feeling that kind of pain again. As she spoke, tears streamed down her face, years of pent-up emotion finally finding release. Maxwell listened in stunned silence, his own eyes filling with tears. When Vivian finally fell silent, he moved to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Oh, Viv," he said softly, "why didn't you tell me? All these years, you've been carrying this burden alone." Vivian shook her head, her voice choked with emotion. "I was afraid. Afraid you'd think less of me, afraid it would change how you saw me. And then, when we couldn't have children of our own, I thought it was my punishment for giving up my baby. I couldn't bear to face it." Maxwell gathered her into his arms, holding her close as she sobbed. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "You were young, you were scared. You made the best decision you could in an impossible situation. It doesn't change how I see you. If anything, it makes me love you more, knowing how strong you've had to be." As Vivian's sobs gradually subsided, Maxwell continued to hold her, stroking her hair gently. "And Viv, have you ever thought that maybe, just maybe, the universe has a way of giving us second chances? That perhaps Lily has come into our lives for a reason." Vivian looked up at him, her eyes wide. "You mean?" Maxwell nodded. "We can't change the past, but we can learn from it, grow from it. Lily needs a family, and we have so much love to give. Maybe this is our chance to heal, to become the family we were always meant to be." As they held each other in the quiet of their room, both Maxwell and Vivian felt a sense of peace settling over them. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still hurts to heal, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in years, they felt truly united, facing the future together. And downstairs in her cozy bedroom, Lily slept peacefully, unaware of the profound changes she had sparked in the Thornton household. In her dreams, sunflowers reached towards the sky, their bright faces a promise of the brighter days to come. The following weeks at the Thornton mansion were filled with a flurry of activity, unlike anything the stately home had seen in years. The east wing, long silent and gathering dust, now echoed with the sound of hammers and saws as renovations began in earnest. Maxwell had thrown himself into the project with gusto, working closely with architects and contractors to transform the space into the community center Vivian had envisioned. Vivian, for her part, had surprised everyone, perhaps even herself, with her hands-on approach to the project. Gone were the designer suits and perfect manicures. Instead, she could often be found poring over floor plans with Maxwell or discussing color schemes with the interior designers, her face alight with enthusiasm. Lily watched it all with wide-eyed wonder, trailing after Vivian and Maxwell as they moved from room to room, absorbing every detail of the transformation. She had taken to carrying a small notebook, jotting down ideas for activities and programs they could offer once the center was open. "What about a cooking class?" she suggested one afternoon, as the three of them stood in what would soon be a large, well-equipped kitchen. "Lots of kids don't know how to cook healthy meals. We could teach them." Maxwell grinned, ruffling Lily's hair affectionately. "That's a wonderful idea, sweetheart. Maybe we could even partner with local chefs for guest lessons." Vivian nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "And we could tie it in with the garden project. The children could learn to grow their own vegetables, then use them in cooking classes. It would teach them about nutrition and sustainability." As they continued to brainstorm, none of them noticed the sleek black car pulling up the driveway, nor the distinguished-looking man who emerged from it, his face set in lines of disapproval. It wasn't until Maria appeared in the doorway, her usually calm demeanor slightly ruffled, that they realized something was amiss. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton," she said, her voice tight. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Thornton's brother is here, Mr. Richard Thornton. He's waiting in the study, and he seems quite agitated." Maxwell's face darkened, a flicker of something like anger passing across his features, before he schooled them into a neutral expression. "Thank you, Maria. We'll be right there." As Maria retreated, Vivian turned to Maxwell, concern etched on her face. "Richard? But he never comes here unannounced. What could be wrong?" Maxwell shook his head, his jaw tight. "I'm not sure, but knowing Richard, it can't be good. Lily, sweetheart, why don't you go help Maria in the kitchen for a while? Vivian and I need to speak with my brother." Lily nodded, her earlier excitement dimmed by the sudden tension in the air. As she scampered off, Maxwell took Vivian's hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever this is, we'll face it together. All right?" Vivian nodded, drawing strength from his touch. Together they made their way to the study, where Richard Thornton stood waiting, his back ramrod straight as he gazed out the window. "Richard," Maxwell said, his voice carefully neutral, "this is unexpected. To what do we owe the pleasure?" Richard turned, his steel-grey eyes sweeping over Maxwell and Vivian with barely concealed disdain. "Pleasure? Hardly. I'm here because I've been hearing some disturbing rumors, Maxwell. Rumors that, if true, could have serious implications for our family's reputation and business interests." Vivian stiffened, her hand tightening in Maxwell's. "What kind of rumors, Richard?" Richard's gaze zeroed in on Vivian, his expression cold. "Well, for starters, there's talk that you've taken in some street urchin, treating her like family. And now I hear you're turning part of this house, our family's ancestral home, into some sort of charity case. A community center." He spat the words out, as if they left a bad taste in his mouth. Maxwell stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "That street urchin, as you call her, is named Lily, and yes, we have taken her in. As for the community center, it's a project Vivian and I are proud to be undertaking. I fail to see how any of this is your concern, Richard." Richard's face flushed with anger. "My concern? My concern is for the Thornton name, Maxwell. Have you given any thought to how this looks? A respected businessman and his wife suddenly playing house with a child off the streets? People will talk, they'll speculate. It could damage our business relationships, our standing in the community." "Our standing in the community will be just fine," Vivian interjected, her voice sharp. "In fact, I'd argue it will be better than ever. We're using our resources to make a real difference, Richard, to help children who haven't had the advantages we have." Richard laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Oh, that's rich, coming from you, Vivian. The ice queen of the country club set, suddenly developing a heart of gold? Please. We all know this is just some misguided attempt to fill the void of your own childlessness." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Maxwell took a step towards his brother, his fists clenched at his sides. "That's enough, Richard. You've overstepped. I think it's time for you to leave." But Richard wasn't finished. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a thick folder. "Not so fast, little brother. I came here with a purpose. These papers, they're adoption proceedings for the girl. If you insist on keeping her, at least do it properly. But I'm warning you, if you go through with this, if you make that child a Thornton, there will be consequences. The board won't look kindly on this distraction from the business." Maxwell's eyes flashed with fury. "Is that a threat, Richard? Because let me be very clear, Lily is not a distraction, she's family. And if the board has a problem with that, well, maybe it's time for some changes in leadership." Richard's face paled. "You wouldn't dare. The company will be just fine," Maxwell interrupted. "In fact, I think it's about time we reassessed our priorities. There's more to life than profit margins, Richard. Lily's shown us that. And if you can't see it, well, perhaps it's time you stepped back from your role on the board." For a moment, Richard stood speechless, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, with a snarl of frustration, he slammed the folder down on Maxwell's desk. "You'll regret this, Maxwell. Mark my words." The tension in the study lingered long after Richard's dramatic exit. Maxwell stood by the window, his shoulders tense, watching his brother's car disappear down the long driveway. Vivian sank into a nearby armchair, her face pale, fingers absently tracing the outline of the locket hidden beneath her blouse. "Well," Maxwell said finally, turning to face his wife, "that could have gone better." Vivian managed a weak smile. "That's putting it mildly. Oh, Maxwell, what are we going to do? Richard seemed so angry. Do you think he'll really try to cause trouble for us? For Lily?" Maxwell moved to kneel beside Vivian's chair, taking her hands in his. "I don't know, Viv. But whatever happens, we'll face it together. Lily is family now, and we'll do whatever it takes to protect her." As if summoned by the mention of her name, a small knock sounded at the study door. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton?" Lily's voice called softly. "Is everything okay? I heard shouting." Exchanging a glance, Maxwell and Vivian called for Lily to enter. The girl stepped into the room hesitantly, her eyes wide with concern as she took in their serious expressions. "Come here, sweetheart," Vivian said, holding out her arms. Lily rushed into them, burying her face in Vivian's shoulder. "Everything's all right. We just had a disagreement with Maxwell's brother, but it's nothing for you to worry about." Lily pulled back, her brow furrowed. "Was he angry because of me? Because you're letting me stay here?" Maxwell's heart clenched at the fear in Lily's voice. "No, Lily. Well, not exactly. Richard, he doesn't understand what we're trying to do here. With you, with the community center. But that's his problem, not yours, okay?" Lily nodded slowly, but her eyes remained troubled. "I don't want to cause problems for you. Maybe it would be better if I left." "Absolutely not," Vivian said fiercely, surprising both Maxwell and Lily with the vehemence in her voice. "Lily, listen to me. You are not a problem. You are a blessing. Having you here, it's opened our eyes to so much. You've brought light and love back into this house. We're not letting you go anywhere." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, and she threw her arms around Vivian's neck. "I love you, Mrs. Thornton," she whispered. Vivian's breath caught in her throat, her own eyes filling with tears. "Oh, Lily," she murmured, stroking the girl's hair. "I love you too, sweetheart, so very much." Maxwell watched the scene unfold, his heart swelling with emotion. In that moment, he knew with absolute certainty that they had made the right decision. Whatever obstacles Richard or anyone else might throw in their path, this love, this family they were building, was worth fighting for. As the days passed, life at the Thornton mansion settled into a new rhythm. The renovations on the East Wing continued apace, with Lily throwing herself into every aspect of the project with boundless enthusiasm. She could often be found trailing after the contractors, pepper them with questions about their work, or helping Vivian sort through catalogues of furniture and educational materials for the center. One sunny afternoon, as Lily and Vivian sat on the terrace, surrounded by brochures and sample books, Lily's attention was caught by a flyer advertising a local art program for children. "Mrs. Thornton," she said excitedly, "look at this. They teach all kinds of art, painting, sculpture, even photography. Do you think we could have classes like this at the center? Vivian leaned over to examine the flyer, a thoughtful expression on her face. That's a wonderful idea, Lily. Art can be so healing, so empowering. I think it would be perfect for the center. As Vivian continued to flip through the brochure, something caught her eye. A photograph of a young girl, maybe a year or two older than Lily, standing proudly next to a colorful abstract painting. There was something about the girl's smile, the tilt of her head, that tugged at Vivian's heart. "Lily," she said slowly, "have you ever thought about trying art yourself? You seem so interested in it." Lily's eyes lit up. "Oh, yes, I used to love drawing before." Her voice trailed off, a shadow passing over her face. "Before everything happened with my mom, we didn't have money for art supplies after that." Vivian's heart ached at the pain in Lily's voice. Without thinking, she reached out and pulled the girl into a tight hug. "Well, we have plenty of supplies here. What do you say we set up a little art studio for you? You could practice and then maybe even teach some classes at the center when it opens." Lily pulled back, her eyes shining with excitement. "Really? You'd do that for me?" "Of course, sweetheart," Vivian said, smoothing Lily's hair back from her face. "We want you to explore your interests, to find what makes you happy." As they continued to discuss plans for Lily's art studio, Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that had come over her when she saw the photograph in the brochure. There was something about it, something that stirred memories she'd long tried to suppress. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Vivian found herself in her private sitting room, a box of old photographs spread out before her. With trembling hands, she sifted through the images, snapshots of her younger self, of the life she'd led before meeting Maxwell. And then, there it was. A photograph she hadn't looked at in years, one she'd almost convinced herself she'd gotten rid of. A tiny baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket, with a shock of dark hair and bright, curious eyes. Vivian's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the image of the daughter she'd given up all those years ago. The daughter who would be about Lily's age now. The daughter whose face she sometimes thought she saw in crowds, whose laugh she imagined she heard on busy streets. A soft knock at the door startled Vivian from her reverie. "Viv?" Maxwell's voice called softly. "Are you all right? You've been in here for hours." Wiping away the tears she hadn't realized were falling, Vivian called for Maxwell to enter. As he took in the scene, the scattered photographs, the haunted look in his wife's eyes, understanding dawned on his face. "Oh, Viv," he said softly, moving to sit beside her on the small sofa. "What's going on?" Vivian took a shaky breath, then held out the photograph of the baby. "I was thinking about Lily, about how much joy she's brought into our lives, and I couldn't help but wonder about her, about what her life has been like, if she's happy, if she's loved." Maxwell wrapped an arm around Vivian's shoulders, pulling her close. "I'm sure she is, Viv. You made the best decision you could at the time. You gave her a chance at a life you weren't able to provide then." Vivian nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. "I know, it's just being with Lily, loving her. It's made me realize how much I missed out on, and how much that little girl, wherever she is now, missed out on having me as her mother." "Vivian, look at me," Maxwell said gently, turning her face towards his. "You are an amazing mother to Lily. The love you have for her, the way you've opened your heart, it's beautiful to see, and who knows? Maybe this is the universe's way of giving you a second chance, of giving both of you a second chance at the family you deserve." As Vivian leaned into her husband's embrace, she felt a mix of emotions washing over her. Grief for the child she'd given up, love for the girl who had unexpectedly entered their lives, hope for the future they were building together. "You're right," she said softly. "Lily is our second chance, and I promise you, Maxwell, I won't waste it. I'll love her with everything I have, and I'll do whatever it takes to give her the life she deserves." As the couple sat together, surrounded by memories of the past and dreams of the future, neither of them could have imagined the challenges that lay ahead. But in that moment, in the quiet of the night, they found strength in each other and in the love they shared for the little girl sleeping peacefully down the hall. The warm summer days melted into a crisp autumn, bringing with it a flurry of activity at the Thornton mansion. The community center was nearing completion, its freshly painted walls and gleaming windows, a testament to the love and care that had gone into its creation. Lily, her eyes shining with excitement, spent every spare moment helping to organize supplies, arrange furniture, and put the finishing touches on what she had come to think of as her project. One brisk Saturday morning, as golden leaves drifted lazily to the ground outside, Lily stood in the centre's main room, surveying their handiwork with pride. Vivian entered, carrying a box of art supplies for the newly established art corner. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Lily said, her voice filled with wonder. "We're actually going to open soon." Vivian set down the box and wrapped an arm around Lily's shoulders. "We certainly are, sweetheart. And it's all thanks to you. Your idea, your passion, you've inspired all of us." Lily leaned into Vivian's embrace, a contented smile on her face. Over the past months, the bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. Vivian marveled at how natural it felt now, this physical affection that had once seemed so foreign to her. Their moment of quiet reflection was interrupted by the sound of Maxwell's voice, calling out from the hallway. "Viv? Lily? Where are you two hiding?" "In here, darling," Vivian called back. "Come see what we've done with the art corner." Maxwell appeared in the doorway, a broad smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye. "It looks wonderful, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to steal you both away for a bit. There's something important we need to discuss." Exchanging curious glances, Vivian and Lily followed Maxwell back to the main house. He led them to his study, where a stack of official-looking documents sat on his desk. "What's all this?" Vivian asked, a note of concern in her voice. "Is everything all right, Maxwell?" Maxwell's smile grew even wider. "Everything is more than all right, my dear. In fact, I'd say things are about to get even better." He turned to Lily, his expression softening. "Lily, sweetheart, do you remember the papers my brother Richard brought that day? The adoption papers?" Lily nodded slowly, her brow furrowing. "Yes. He was angry about them. He didn't want you to adopt me." "That's right," Maxwell said gently. "But here's the thing, Lily. What Richard wants doesn't matter. What matters is what we want, you, me, and Vivian. And what we want more than anything is for you to be a permanent part of our family." Lily's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. "You mean?" Vivian stepped forward, taking Lily's small hands in hers. "What Maxwell is trying to say, sweetheart, is that we want to adopt you officially, legally. We want you to be our daughter if that's what you want too." For a moment, Lily stood frozen, her eyes darting between Maxwell and Vivian as if searching for any sign of hesitation or doubt. Finding none, she launched herself into Vivian's arms, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes!" she cried, her voice muffled against Vivian's shoulder. "Yes, I want that more than anything." Maxwell enveloped them both in a bear hug, his own eyes suspiciously moist. For a long moment, the three of them stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, reveling in the love and belonging they had found in each other. As they finally pulled apart, wiping away happy tears, Maxwell cleared his throat. "There's more," he said, a hint of nervousness creeping into his voice. "Vivian and I have been talking and, well, we think it might be time for some changes in our lives." Vivian nodded encouragingly, squeezing Lily's hand. "You see, sweetheart, working on the community center has made us realize how much good we could do if we really put our minds to it. And, well, we've been thinking that maybe it's time to step back from the business world a bit." Lily looked between them, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" Maxwell sat down in his chair, pulling Lily onto his lap as he had done so many times over the past months. "What we mean is that we're thinking of selling a big part of the company. Not all of it, but enough that we won't have to spend so much time in board meetings and on business trips. Instead, we want to focus on the community center, on helping kids like you who need a chance." But the company is so important to you," Lily said, her voice small. "You've worked so hard on it. Are you sure you want to give that up?" Vivian knelt beside them, her eyes soft with emotion. "Oh, Lily, the company is important, yes, but not nearly as important as family, as love. You've taught us that, sweetheart. You've shown us what really matters in life." Lily's lower lip trembled as she looked between the two people who had become her world. "But what about your brother? Won't he be angry?" Maxwell chuckled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Oh, I'm sure Richard will have plenty to say about it. But you know what? That's okay. Sometimes doing the right thing means facing opposition, even from family. What matters is that we know in our hearts that this is the right path for us." As the implications of this decision began to sink in, Lily's mind raced with possibilities. Does this mean, will we have more time together? More family dinners and movie nights and trips to the park? Absolutely, Vivian said, her face glowing with happiness. And not just that. We'll have more time to work on the community center, to really make a difference in people's lives, and who knows, maybe we'll even have time for that world tour you've been dreaming about. Lily's eyes lit up at the mention of travel. Ever since Maxwell had shown her his collection of photographs from his business trips around the world, she had been fascinated by the idea of exploring new places, meeting new people, seeing the wonders of the world with her own eyes. Really, she breathed, hardly daring to believe it. We could go anywhere. Maxwell nodded, his eyes twinkling. Anywhere your heart desires, princess. Paris, Rome, Tokyo, the world will be our oyster. As Lily's imagination took flight, filled with visions of ancient monuments and bustling foreign markets, Vivian and Maxwell exchanged a look of pure joy. This was what they had been missing all along. The excitement of new adventures, the warmth of family love, the satisfaction of making a real difference in the world. The crisp autumn air carried with it a sense of anticipation as the day of the community center's grand opening dawned. The Thornton mansion was abuzz with activity, staff members rushing to and fro as they made last-minute preparations for the event that would mark a new chapter in the family's life. Lily stood before her bedroom mirror, fidgeting nervously with the collar of her new dress. It was a pretty thing, sky blue with delicate white flowers, chosen specially for this important day. As she struggled with a particularly stubborn button, a soft knock sounded at her door. "Come in," she called, turning to see Vivian enter the room, looking elegant as always in a tailored pantsuit. "Oh, sweetheart," Vivian said, her eyes softening at the sight of Lily's frustration. "Here, let me help you with that." As Vivian's deft fingers made quick work of the troublesome button, Lily looked up at her soon-to-be official mother, a question burning in her eyes. "Mrs. Thornton, I mean Mom," she began, the new title still feeling foreign on her tongue. "Do you think people will like the center? Will they understand why we're doing this?" Vivian's hands stilled for a moment, her gaze meeting Lily's in the mirror. "Oh, Lily," she said softly, "I'm sure some people will love it, and others might not understand at first. But that's okay. What matters is that we know we're doing the right thing. We're offering help and hope to children who need it, just like you needed it when Maxwell found you in the park." Lily nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I just want it to be perfect. I want to make you and Dad proud." Vivian turned Lily to face her, cupping the girl's face gently in her hands. "Listen to me, Lily. You've already made us prouder than we ever thought possible. Your compassion, your enthusiasm, your big heart, those are the things that matter, not whether every detail of the opening is perfect." Downstairs, Maxwell paced the foyer, checking his watch for what felt like the 100th time. The guests would be arriving soon. City officials, potential donors, representatives from local schools and social services. It was a big day, not just for the community center, but for Thornton Enterprises as well. Today, Maxwell would be announcing the company's new direction, its commitment to social responsibility and community investment. As he adjusted his tie nervously, Maxwell caught sight of a familiar figure through the window. His brother Richard, looking as stern and imposing as ever in a sharp business suit, was making his way up the driveway. Taking a deep breath to steel himself, Maxwell opened the front door before Richard could knock. "Richard," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "I'm glad you could make it." Richard's eyes narrowed as he took in the festive decorations adorning the mansion's entrance. "Really, Maxwell? I would have thought my presence would be the last thing you'd want today." Maxwell stepped aside, gesturing for his brother to enter. "Your family, Richard. Despite our differences, I'd hoped you'd want to be part of this new chapter in our lives." As Richard stepped into the foyer, his gaze sweeping critically over the changes that had been made to the old house, Maxwell couldn't help but notice the lines of tension around his brother's eyes, the slight slump to his usually ramrod-straight shoulders. "Richard," Maxwell said softly, "is everything all right? You seem tired." For a moment, Richard's carefully constructed mask of indifference slipped, revealing a flash of vulnerability that took Maxwell by surprise. But as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone, replaced by Richard's usual look of cool disdain. "I'm fine," he snapped. "Let's just get this over with, shall we?" I assume you'll want me front and center when you announce the dismantling of our family's legacy. Maxwell sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. It's not like that, Richard. And you know it. We're not dismantling anything. We're evolving, adapting to a changing world. The community center, the new focus on social responsibility, it's all part of ensuring Thornton Enterprises has a future. Richard opened his mouth to retort, but was interrupted by the sound of laughter floating down the stairs. Lily and Vivian appeared, arm in arm, their faces alight with excitement for the day ahead. As Lily caught sight of Richard, her steps faltered for a moment, her smile dimming. But then, to everyone's surprise, she squared her small shoulders and approached him, her hand outstretched. "Hello, Mr. Thornton," she said politely. "Thank you for coming to our opening. Would you like me to show you around the center? We have an art room that I think you might find interesting." Richard stared at the offered hand, as if it were a foreign object, his expression a mix of confusion and something that looked almost like regret. After a moment's hesitation, he took Lily's hand, giving it a brief shake. That won't be necessary," he said gruffly. "I'm sure I'll see it all during the tour." Lily nodded, undeterred by his brusque manner. "Okay, but if you change your mind, just let me know. I'd be happy to show you my favorite parts." As Lily turned back to Vivian, chattering excitedly about greeting the guests, Richard watched her go, an unreadable expression on his face. "She's quite something, isn't she?" Maxwell said quietly, coming to stand beside his brother. Richard was silent for a long moment, his eyes still on Lily's retreating form. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reluctant. "She reminds me of someone." Maxwell raised an eyebrow, surprised by the wistful note in his brother's voice. "Oh, who?" Richard shook his head as if trying to dispel an unwelcome thought. "It doesn't matter. Ancient history." He turned to Maxwell, his expression hardening once more. "Don't think this changes anything, Maxwell. I still think you're making a mistake with all of this." Before Maxwell could respond, the sound of car doors slamming announced the arrival of the first guests. The brothers exchanged a look, Maxwell's pleading, Richard's unreadable, before moving to greet the newcomers. As the foyer began to fill with people, a buzz of excitement in the air, Lily found herself swept up in a whirlwind of introductions and handshakes. She moved from group to group, her natural charm and enthusiasm winning over even the most skeptical of guests. Vivian watched from across the room, her heart swelling with pride as she saw Lily confidently explaining the center's programs to a group of city officials. It was hard to believe that this poised, articulate young girl was the same scared, silent child they had taken in just months ago. As the time for Maxwell's speech approached, Vivian made her way to her husband's side, slipping her hand into his and giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Ready for this?" she murmured, noting the nervous energy radiating off him. Maxwell took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the crowded room before landing on Lily, who was now deep in conversation with the mayor. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said. "It's a big step, Viv. No going back after this." Vivian nodded, her gaze following Maxwell's to Lily. "No," she agreed softly. "No going back, but think of all we have to look forward to." As Maxwell stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the gathered crowd. Lily hurried to Vivian's side, slipping her small hand into her soon-to-be mother's. Together they watched as Maxwell cleared his throat, his voice strong and clear as he began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, thank you all for being here today. We're here to celebrate the opening of the Thornton Community Center, but we're also here to mark the beginning of a new era for Thornton Enterprises." As Maxwell's words filled the room, outlining his vision for a company that balanced profit with social responsibility, Vivian felt a surge of love and pride. This was the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, passionate, principled, unafraid to stand up for what he believed in. The weeks following the grand opening of the Thornton Community Center were a whirlwind of activity. The center quickly became a hub of life and learning, its halls echoing with the laughter of children and the earnest discussions of adults seeking to better their lives. Lily threw herself into every aspect of the center's operations, from tutoring younger children to helping organize art classes and workshops. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze outside, Lily stood at the center's front desk, carefully sorting through a stack of registration forms for the upcoming winter programs. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she entered data into the computer, a task she had insisted on learning to help lighten the load on the center's small staff. The sound of the front door opening caught her attention, and she looked up with a welcoming smile that quickly froze on her face. There, looking as out of place as a penguin in a desert, stood Richard Thornton. For a moment, neither spoke. Richard's eyes darted around the room, taking in the colorful artwork adorning the walls, the well-worn furniture that spoke of comfort rather than luxury, the bulletin board covered in flyers for various programs and events. Lily was the first to break the silence. "Hello, Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. "Can I help you with something?" Richard's gaze snapped back to her, his expression unreadable. I'm looking for my brother. Is he here?" Lily shook her head. "Dad's at a meeting downtown. He should be back in an hour or so. Would you like to wait? I could show you around if you'd like." A flicker of something, surprise, amusement, passed across Richard's face at Lily's use of the word dad. He seemed about to refuse, but then, to Lily's astonishment, he gave a curt nod. "Very well," he said, his tone brusque but not unkind. "Show me what all the fuss is about." Lily stepped out from behind the desk, smoothing down her shirt nervously. "Well, we could start with the classrooms. We have adult education classes in the evenings. Things like English as a second language, computer skills, and financial literacy." As they moved through the center, Lily found herself warming to her role as tour guide. She pointed out the art room, where a group of children were engrossed in a painting project, and the small library stocked with donated books. Richard remained largely silent, but Lily noticed his eyes lingering on the faces of the children, the volunteers, the parents who had come to pick up their kids. They paused outside a room where a group of teenagers were engaged in what looked like a heated debate. "This is our youth leadership program," Lily explained. "They're learning about local government and how to advocate for changes in their community." For the first time since they'd started the tour, Richard spoke up. "And what changes are they advocating for?" Lily's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, all sorts of things. Better funding for schools, more green spaces in the city, programs to address food insecurity. They're really passionate about making a difference." Richard's brow furrowed. "And you think a bunch of teenagers can actually accomplish these things?" "Why not?" Lily countered, a hint of defiance in her voice. "They're the ones who will inherit this community. Shouldn't they have a say in shaping it?" For a moment, Richard simply stared at her, an unreadable expression on his face. Then, to Lily's utter amazement, the corners of his mouth twitched upward, in what might almost have been a smile. "You sound just like Maxwell at that age," he said softly, almost to himself, always fighting for the underdog, believing he could change the world. Lily's eyes widened at this unexpected glimpse into her adoptive father's past. "Really? Dad doesn't talk much about when he was younger." Richard's expression clouded over once more. "No, I suppose he wouldn't." He turned abruptly, heading back towards the front of the center. "I think I've seen enough. Tell Maxwell I'll be in touch." As Richard reached for the door handle, it swung open, revealing a startled Maxwell on the other side. "Richard?" he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing here?" Richard straightened, his face settling back into its usual mask of cool indifference. "Just getting a first-hand look at your latest project. Your ward here was kind enough to show me around." Maxwell's eyes darted to Lily, a mixture of concern and pride on his face. "I see. And what did you think?" For a long moment, Richard was silent, his gaze moving from Maxwell to Lily and back again. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost reluctant. "It's not what I expected. The children seem engaged. Happy, even." Maxwell's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "High praise indeed coming from you, brother." Richard scowled, but there was less heat in it than usual. "Don't get carried away, Maxwell. I still think you're taking an enormous risk with the company's resources, but perhaps I was hasty in my judgment of your motives." With that, he brushed past Maxwell and out the door, leaving behind a stunned silence. Lily was the first to recover. "Dad?" she said, hesitantly. "Is everything okay?" Maxwell shook himself out of his daze, turning to Lily with a warm smile. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. In fact, I think that might have been the closest thing to a compliment I've gotten from Richard in years." As they made their way back to the front desk, Maxwell's arm draped comfortably around Lily's shoulders. He couldn't help but marvel at the changes that had taken place in their lives. Not just in the grand, obvious ways, the community center, the shift in the company's focus, but in the small, everyday moments. The way Lily's face lit up when she talked about her work at the center, the sound of laughter echoing through the once silent halls of their home, the newfound sense of purpose that had rejuvenated both him and Vivian. "You know," he said, giving Lily a gentle squeeze, "I'm incredibly proud of you. The way you handled Richard, showing him around, explaining everything. You've really come into your own here." Lily beamed up at him, her eyes shining with happiness. "I love it here, Dad. I feel like I'm really making a difference, you know?" Maxwell nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "You are, sweetheart. You really are." As they settled back into their routine, Maxwell at his makeshift office in the corner, Lily at the front desk, neither of them could have predicted the storm that was brewing just beyond the horizon. Richard's visit, brief as it had been, had set in motion a chain of events that would test the strength of their newfound family and the very foundations of everything they had built. But for now, in the warm, bustling heart of the community center, surrounded by the tangible results of their dreams and hard work, Maxwell and Lily basked in the glow of a job well done and a future full of promise. The challenges that lay ahead were still hidden from view, waiting to reveal themselves in the days and weeks to come. The crisp autumn air had given way to the first biting chill of winter, and the Thornton Community Center hummed with the excitement of the upcoming holiday season. Colorful paper chains and twinkling lights adorned the hallways, and the scent of cinnamon and pine wafted from the craft room, where children were busily making ornaments and decorations. Lily stood at the center's main entrance, greeting families as they arrived for the evening's financial literacy workshop. Her cheeks were flushed with the cold and excitement, her eyes sparkling as she handed out information packets and directed people to the classroom. "Remember," she called out to a harried-looking mother juggling a toddler and a diaper bag, "we have free childcare available in the playroom down the hall." As the last stragglers made their way inside, Lily turned to find Vivian watching her with a proud smile. "You're a natural at this, sweetheart," Vivian said, wrapping an arm around Lily's shoulders. "I don't know what we'd do without you." Lily leaned into the embrace, basking in the warmth of Vivian's affection. These moments still felt like tiny miracles to her, reminders of how much her life had changed in the past months. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the sharp ring of Vivian's cell phone. Frowning slightly, Vivian glanced at the caller ID. "It's Maxwell," she said, a note of concern in her voice. "He should be here by now for the workshop." As Vivian stepped away to take the call, Lily busied herself straightening the welcome desk, trying to ignore the knot of worry forming in her stomach. She couldn't help but notice that Maxwell had been working later and later recently, his brow often furrowed with concerns he tried to hide from her. When Vivian returned, her face was tight with barely concealed tension. "Lily, sweetheart, I need to go meet your father at the office. There's been some sort of situation with the company. Can you hold down the fort here?" Lily nodded, straightening her shoulders. "Of course, Mom, don't worry about anything here. I've got it under control." Vivian's eyes softened at Lily's use of Mom, a term that still sent a thrill through her every time she heard it. She pulled Lily into a quick, fierce hug. "You're amazing, you know that? We'll be back as soon as we can." As Vivian's car pulled out of the parking lot, Lily turned back to the center, determined to ensure everything ran smoothly in her parents' absence. She threw herself into her tasks with renewed vigor, checking in on classes, assisting volunteers, and even stepping in to lead a children's story time when one of the regular readers called in sick. It wasn't until much later, as she was helping to clean up after the last of the evening's programs, that Lily realized how late it had gotten. Her parents still hadn't returned, and the gnawing worry in her stomach had grown into full-fledged anxiety. Just as she was debating whether to call them, the center's front door swung open, admitting a gust of frigid air and a visibly agitated Maxwell and Vivian. "Lily," Maxwell said, his voice strained. "I'm so sorry we're late. Thank you for handling everything here." Lily rushed to her parents, her eyes scanning their faces. "What happened? Is everything okay?" Maxwell and Vivian exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Finally, Vivian sighed, reaching out to take Lily's hand. "Let's sit down, sweetheart. There's something we need to discuss." They made their way to Maxwell's office, a cozy space tucked away at the back of the center. As they settled onto the worn leather couch, Lily's heart raced with apprehension. Maxwell ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Lily had come to recognize as a sign of stress. "Lily," he began, his voice heavy, "there's been some trouble at the company. It seems that some of our investors aren't happy with the new direction we've taken." Lily's brow furrowed. "You mean with the community center, but why? It's doing so much good." Vivian smiled sadly. "Not everyone sees it that way, darling. Some people believe that a company's only responsibility is to make money for its shareholders. They don't understand the value of what we're doing here." Maxwell nodded, his expression grim. "They're threatening to pull their investments if we don't refocus on more traditional business ventures. And without their support, we might not be able to keep the center running." The words hit Lily like a physical blow. She looked around the office, taking in the children's artwork pinned to the walls, the framed photos of smiling families whose lives had been changed by the center's programs. The thought of losing all of this was almost too much to bear. But we can't let that happen," she exclaimed, her voice rising with emotion. "There must be something we can do." Maxwell reached out, pulling Lily into a comforting embrace. "We're not giving up, sweetheart. Not by a long shot. We're going to fight this with everything we've got. But I wanted you to know what we're up against. It might get tough for a while." As Lily clung to her father, her mind raced with possibilities. She thought of all the people who had come through the center's doors, whose lives had been touched and changed. Surely their stories would make a difference. "What if," she said slowly, pulling back to look at both her parents, "what if we showed the investors what the center really means to people? We could make a video or put together a presentation. Let them see the real impact we're having." Vivian's eyes lit up. "That's a wonderful idea, Lily. We could interview some of the families who've benefited from our programs, show the investors the tangible results of our work." Maxwell nodded, a spark of hope kindling in his eyes. "It's worth a try. At the very least, it might buy us some time to come up with a more permanent solution." As they began to brainstorm ideas for their presentation, Lily felt a renewed sense of purpose. This center, this family, this new life she had found, it was all worth fighting for. And fight they would with every ounce of strength and creativity they possessed. But even as they made plans and strategies, none of them could have anticipated the storm that was brewing just beyond the horizon. Richard Thornton, stung by his reluctant admiration for the center and determined to protect what he saw as the family legacy, was making plans of his own. Plans that would test the bonds of family, the limits of forgiveness, and the very foundations of everything the Thorntons had built. As the night deepened outside the center's windows, Lily, Maxwell, and Vivian huddled together, their voices low and determined as they plotted their course. They were a family united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But the shadows were lengthening, and the true test of their strength was yet to come. The following weeks were a blur of activity, as the Thorntons threw themselves into preparing their presentation for the investors. Lily, driven by a fierce determination to save the center that had become her second home, poured every ounce of her creativity and passion into the project. One chilly Saturday morning, Lily sat cross-legged on the floor of the center's main hall, surrounded by a sea of photographs, testimonials, and colorful charts. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she carefully arranged and rearranged the materials, searching for the perfect way to tell their story. "How's it coming along, sweetheart?" Vivian's voice broke through Lily's focus. She looked up to see her mother approaching with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. Lily sighed, accepting the mug gratefully. "I think it's getting there, but it still feels like something's missing. I want them to really feel what this place means to people, you know?" Vivian settled down beside Lily, her eyes scanning the scattered materials. "I know what you mean. It's not just about numbers and statistics. It's about the lives we're changing, the hope we're giving people." As they sat together, sipping their hot chocolate and brainstorming ideas, the center's front door swung open, admitting a gust of cold air and an unexpected visitor. Richard Thornton stood in the doorway, looking somewhat uncomfortable in casual weekend attire, a far cry from his usual impeccable suits. Lily and Vivian exchanged a surprised glance before Vivian rose to greet her brother-in-law. "Richard," she said, her tone cautious but not unfriendly, "this is unexpected. Maxwell's not here at the moment, but actually, Richard interrupted, his eyes darting around the room before settling on Lily. I came to speak with both of you. If you have a moment, that is. Vivian's eyebrows rose in surprise, but she nodded, gesturing for Richard to join them. As he picked his way through the scattered papers on the floor, Lily hurriedly tried to organize the chaos, feeling oddly protective of their work. Richard settled into a nearby chair, his posture stiff and uncomfortable. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by the soft hum of the heating system and the distant laughter of children in the playroom. Finally, Richard cleared his throat. Tyson, I've been doing some thinking, he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. About the company, about this center, about everything. Lily and Vivian remained silent, sensing that Richard needed to get something off his chest. He continued, his words coming faster now as if he feared losing his nerve. I've always believed in the importance of tradition, of maintaining the legacy our father built. I thought Maxwell's new direction for the company was a mistake, a betrayal of everything we've worked for. He paused, his eyes landing on a nearby bulletin board covered in thank you notes and children's drawings. But I'm beginning to wonder if perhaps I've been too rigid in my thinking. Vivian leaned forward, her expression a mixture of hope and wariness. What are you saying, Richard? Richard's gaze shifted to Lily, who was watching him with wide, curious eyes. I'm saying that perhaps there's more than one way to honor a legacy. That perhaps Maxwell's vision for the company isn't as misguided as I initially thought. Lily's heart began to race with excitement. Could it be possible? Could Richard, their staunchest opponent, be coming around to their side? Mr. Thornton, she said, unable to contain herself any longer, does this mean you'll help us? Help us show the investors how important the center is. A ghost of a smile flickered across Richard's face. I'm not promising anything, young lady, but I'm willing to listen, to really look at what you're doing here and consider the possibility that it might have value. Vivian reached out, placing a hand on Richard's arm. Thank you, Richard. That means more than you know. Would you like to see what we've been working on? We're putting together a presentation for the investors to show them the impact the center is having. Richard nodded, his posture relaxing slightly. I'd like that very much. For the next hour, Lily and Vivian walked Richard through their materials, sharing stories of lives changed, families supported, and communities strengthened. As they talked, Lily couldn't help but notice the subtle shifts in Richard's expression, a softening around the eyes, a thoughtful furrow of the brow. When they finished, Richard was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant as he processed everything he'd seen and heard. Finally he spoke, his voice low and measured. You've certainly given me a lot to think about. I can see now that there's substance to what you're doing here. It's not just some frivolous pet project. Lily's face lit up with a hopeful smile. Does that mean you'll help us convince the investors? Richard held up a hand, tempering her enthusiasm. I'm not making any promises, but I will speak with some of my contacts on the board. See if I can get them to keep an open mind, at least until they've seen your full presentation. As Richard rose to leave, Vivian walked him to the door. Lily couldn't hear their low conversation, but she saw the way Vivian squeezed Richard's arm gratefully, the small nod he gave in return. When Vivian returned, her eyes were shining with unshed tears. Well, she said, her voice thick with emotion, I think we might have just found an unexpected ally. Lily threw her arms around Vivian, her heart soaring with renewed hope. Do you think it will make a difference? Will it be enough to save the center? Vivian hugged Lily tightly, her voice firm with determination. I don't know, sweetheart, but it's certainly improved our chances. And more importantly, it shows that people can change, that they can open their hearts and minds when given the opportunity. As they returned to their work with renewed vigor, Lily couldn't help but feel that something fundamental had shifted. The battle ahead was still daunting, the outcome far from certain, but they had made a crack in the armor of their strongest opponent, and in doing so, had opened up new possibilities for understanding and reconciliation. Later that evening, as Maxwell returned from a long day of meetings, Vivian and Lily excitedly recounted Richard's visit. Maxwell listened in stunned silence, his expression cycling through disbelief, hope, and cautious optimism. Well, he said finally, shaking his head in wonder, Miracles never cease, do they? Richard, of all people. As the family sat down to dinner, their conversation buzzing with plans and strategies, Lily felt a warm glow of contentment. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as a family, stronger and more united than ever before. But even as hope blossomed anew in the Thornton household, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. Unbeknownst to them, forces were aligning against their vision, threats that would test their resolve and push their newfound family bonds to the breaking point. The true battle for the heart and soul of Thornton Enterprises, and for the future of the community they had come to love, was only just beginning. The day of the crucial investor meeting dawned cold and grey, a fitting backdrop for the tension that hung over the Thornton household. Lily stood before her bedroom mirror, carefully smoothing down her new blazer, a gift from Vivian for this important day. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Today was the day they would fight for everything they had built. Downstairs, Maxwell paced the kitchen, his usually immaculate appearance slightly rumpled from a night of restless sleep. Vivian sat at the table, sipping her coffee and watching her husband with concern. "Darling, you need to eat something," she said gently, pushing a plate of toast towards him. Maxwell shook his head, his mind clearly elsewhere. "I can't, Viv. There's too much at stake. If we can't convince them today..." His words trailed off as Lily entered the kitchen, her face a mixture of nervousness and determination. "We will convince them, Dad," she said firmly. "We have to." Maxwell's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. He marveled at how much she had grown, not just in height but in confidence and poise. "You're right, sweetheart. We've worked too hard to give up now." As the family made their way to Thornton Enterprises headquarters, the city seemed to hold its breath. The streets were quieter than usual, as if the very air knew the importance of the day ahead. The boardroom was already half full when they arrived, a sea of serious faces and crisp suits. Lily felt her confidence waver for a moment, but a reassuring squeeze of her hand from Vivian steadied her. They could do this. They had to. As the last of the investors filed in, Lily caught sight of a familiar face, Richard Thornton, looking uncharacteristically subdued. He gave them a small nod, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to kindle a spark of hope in Lily's chest. Maxwell stepped to the front of the room, his voice strong and clear as he began their presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming today. We're here to talk about the future of Thornton Enterprises, a future that I believe is brighter and more promising than ever before." For the next hour, Maxwell, Vivian and Lily took turns presenting their vision for the company. They shared stories of lives changed at the community center, showed charts detailing the positive impact on the local economy, and outlined plans for expanding their social responsibility initiatives. Lily's heart swelled with pride as she watched her parents speak with such passion and conviction. When it was her turn, she stepped forward, her voice only trembling slightly as she began to speak. "I know I'm young," she said, meeting the eyes of each investor in turn, "and I know that to many of you I'm just a child who doesn't understand the complexities of business. But I understand something that I think is even more important, the power of hope and the difference it can make in people's lives." She went on to share her own story, how she had gone from a scared, homeless girl to a confident young woman with dreams for the future, all because someone had cared enough to give her a chance. As Lily finished speaking, a hush fell over the room. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then slowly one of the investors, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, stood up. "Mr. Thornton," she said, her voice measured, "I came here today fully prepared to vote against this new direction for the company. I believed it was a misuse of resources, a deviation from what has made Thornton Enterprises successful." Lily's heart sank, but the woman wasn't finished. "However," she continued, "after hearing your presentation, and especially after listening to this remarkable young lady, I find myself reconsidering. You've shown us today that there's more than one way to measure success, and that doing good and doing well in business are not mutually exclusive." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. More investors began to speak up, asking questions, offering suggestions. The atmosphere shifted from one of skepticism to one of cautious optimism. As the meeting drew to a close, Maxwell called for a vote on continuing support for the community center and the company's new direction. Lily held her breath as hands were raised around the room. "The motion passes," Maxwell announced, his voice thick with emotion. Thornton Enterprises will continue its commitment to social responsibility and community investment. The room erupted in applause. Lily felt tears of joy and relief streaming down her face as Vivian pulled her into a tight embrace. They had done it. They had saved the center. As the investors began to file out, many stopped to shake hands with the Thorntons, offering congratulations and words of support. Richard approached last, his expression unreadable. "Well, brother," he said to Maxwell, "it seems you've won the day. I have to admit your presentation was compelling." Maxwell extended his hand. "Thank you, Richard. Your support meant a lot. I hope we can continue to work together moving forward." Richard hesitated for a moment before taking Maxwell's hand. "We'll see. There's still a lot to discuss." As Richard turned to leave, Lily called out to him, "Mr. Thornton, thank you for giving us a chance." Richard paused, looking back at Lily with an expression that might almost have been a smile. "You did well today, young lady. You should be proud." With that, he was gone, leaving the Thorntons to bask in the glow of their hard-won victory. Later that evening, as the family celebrated over a special dinner at home, Lily couldn't help but feel that a weight had been lifted from all their shoulders. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise, but even as they toasted their success, none of them could have anticipated the challenges that still lay ahead. For in the shadows, unseen and unheard, forces were gathering that would test their newfound unity and threaten everything they had fought so hard to build. The storm that had been brewing on the horizon was about to break, and the Thorntons would need every ounce of strength and love they had found in each other to weather it. The weeks following the investor meeting were filled with a renewed sense of purpose and energy. The Thornton Community Center buzzed with activity as new programs were launched and existing ones expanded. Lily threw herself into her work with enthusiasm, her confidence bolstered by the role she had played in saving the center. One crisp autumn morning, Lily stood at the center's front desk, sorting through a stack of mail. Most of it was the usual: bills, program inquiries, thank you notes from grateful families. But one envelope caught her eye. It was addressed simply to the Thornton family in an elegant, unfamiliar hand. Curious, Lily carried the letter to Maxwell's office. She found him deep in conversation with Vivian, their heads bent over a pile of blueprints, plans for the center's upcoming expansion. "Dad, Mom," Lily said, holding out the envelope, "this just came for us. It looks different." Maxwell took the envelope, his brow furrowing as he examined it. With a small shrug, he opened it and began to read. As his eyes scanned the page, the color drained from his face. "Maxwell," Vivian said, alarm evident in her voice. "What is it? What's wrong?" Maxwell looked up, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. It's from Elizabeth. Elizabeth Collier." Vivian gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Lily looked between her parents, confusion and worry warring in her chest. "Who's Elizabeth Collier?" she asked hesitantly. For a moment, neither Maxwell nor Vivian seemed to hear her. They were locked in a silent exchange, years of shared history passing between them in a single look. Finally, Vivian turned to Lily, her voice gentle but strained. "Elizabeth Collier was a very dear friend of ours, sweetheart. Many years ago, before you came into our lives." Maxwell nodded, his voice distant as he added, "She left town suddenly about 15 years ago. We never knew why, never heard from her again, until now." Lily's mind raced. She had never heard her parents mention this Elizabeth before. What could have happened to cause such a reaction? And why was she reaching out now after all this time? "What does she say?" Lily asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Maxwell cleared his throat, glancing back down at the letter. "She says she's back in town, that she has something important to discuss with us. She wants to meet." A heavy silence fell over the room. Lily could almost feel the weight of unspoken words, of secrets long buried, pressing down on them all. Vivian was the first to break the silence. "We should meet her, Maxwell. Whatever happened in the past, we owe her that much." Maxwell nodded slowly, his eyes distant. "You're right, of course. I'll arrange it." As her parents fell into a hushed discussion about when and where to meet Elizabeth, Lily's mind whirled with questions. Who was this woman? What could she possibly have to say that would cause such a stir? And why did Lily have the unsettling feeling that her own life was somehow tangled up in this mystery? The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation and nervous energy. Lily tried to focus on her work at the center, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous was about to happen. She caught her parents in whispered conversations that would abruptly stop when she entered the room, saw the worried glances they exchanged when they thought she wasn't looking. Finally, the day of the meeting arrived. Elizabeth had suggested a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. As they pulled into the parking lot, Lily's stomach churned with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The cafe was nearly empty when they entered, just a few patrons scattered at tables near the windows, and there, in a secluded corner booth, sat a woman who could only be Elizabeth Collier. She was striking even after all these years, tall and elegant, with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing green eyes. As the Thorntons approached, she stood, a tentative smile playing at her lips. "Maxwell, Vivian," she said softly, her voice rich and warm. "It's been far too long." For a moment, no one moved. Then, as if a spell had been broken, Vivian stepped forward and embraced Elizabeth. Maxwell followed suit, though Lily couldn't help but notice the stiffness in his posture. As they all settled into the booth, Elizabeth's gaze fell on Lily. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something passing across her face. "And this must be Lily," she said. "I've heard so much about you." Lily smiled politely, though her mind was racing. How did Elizabeth know about her? What exactly had she heard? As the adults fell into stilted small talk, Lily found herself studying Elizabeth closely. There was something familiar about her, something Lily couldn't quite put her finger on. The shape of her eyes, perhaps, or the way she gestured as she spoke. Suddenly, Elizabeth's demeanor changed. She set down her coffee cup with a decisive clink, her expression growing serious. "I suppose we should get to the reason I asked you here," she said, her voice low and intense. Maxwell and Vivian exchanged a glance, then nodded for Elizabeth to continue. Elizabeth took a deep breath, her eyes fixing on Lily with an intensity that made the girl squirm in her seat. "Lily," she said softly, "there's something you need to know, something I should have told you all years ago." Lily's heart began to race. She felt Vivian's hand close over hers under the table, a gesture of support, and was that fear? Elizabeth's next words fell like bombs in the quiet cafe, shattering the world as Lily knew it. "Lily?" Elizabeth said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm your mother, your birth mother." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lily felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. She looked wildly between Elizabeth and her parents, no, her adoptive parents, searching for some sign that this was all a mistake, a misunderstanding. But the anguish on Vivian's face, the grim set of Maxwell's jaw, told her it was true. Somehow impossibly, devastatingly true. As the implications of Elizabeth's words began to sink in, Lily felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble around her. Who was she really? Where did she come from? And most importantly, what did this mean for the family she had come to love so dearly? The storm that had been gathering on the horizon had finally broken, and in its wake, nothing would ever be the same again. The drive home from the cafe was a blur of conflicting emotions for Lily. The world outside the car window seemed to rush by in a haze, buildings and trees melting into an indistinct smear of color. Inside the vehicle, the silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional sniffle from Vivian in the front seat. Lily's mind raced, replaying Elizabeth's words over and over again. "I'm your mother, your birth mother." How could 6 simple words upend her entire world so completely? As they pulled into the driveway of the Thornton mansion, Lily felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to run, to escape from this new reality that felt too big, too confusing to comprehend. But where would she go? Who was she now? Maxwell turned off the engine, but no one moved to get out of the car. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Lily, sweetheart, I know this is a lot to process, but I want you to know that nothing has changed for us. We love you just as much as we always have." Vivian turned in her seat, her eyes red-rimmed but filled with fierce love. "You're our daughter, Lily. Nothing will ever change that." Lily wanted to believe them. She wanted to throw herself into their arms and let their love wash away the confusion and hurt. But something held her back. A new wariness, born of the knowledge that the very foundations of her life had been built on secrets. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "All this time, why keep it a secret?" Maxwell and Vivian exchanged a pained look. "We wanted to protect you," Vivian said softly. We hoped that by giving you a stable home, a family that loved you unconditionally, we could spare you the pain of feeling abandoned." "But I wasn't abandoned, was I?" Lily said, a note of anger creeping into her voice. "Elizabeth, my birth mother, she wants to know me. She came back for me." "Lily," Maxwell said gently, "it's not that simple. There's a lot you don't know about the circumstances of your adoption, a lot that we don't fully understand ourselves." Lily felt a surge of frustration. More secrets, more things being kept from her for her own good. Without another word, she opened the car door and ran into the house, ignoring her parents' calls behind her. She found herself in her bedroom, the space that had been her sanctuary since the day Maxwell had brought her home from the park. But now, looking around at the cheerful decorations and family photos, she felt like a stranger in her own life. Lily's gaze fell on the mirror above her dresser. The face that looked back at her was familiar, and yet somehow foreign. She searched her reflection, looking for traces of Elizabeth in her features. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her cheek. How had she never noticed before? A soft knock at the door interrupted her scrutiny. "Lily?" Vivian's voice called softly. "May we come in?" Lily hesitated for a moment before murmuring her assent. Maxwell and Vivian entered, their faces etched with concern and love. They sat on the edge of Lily's bed, leaving space between them. An invitation. After a moment's hesitation, Lily joined them, allowing herself to be enveloped in their embrace. For a long while, they simply sat there, holding each other, the love between them a tangible force even in the midst of this upheaval. Finally, Maxwell spoke. "Lily, we owe you an apology. We should have told you the truth about your adoption long ago. We were wrong to keep it from you, and we're so sorry." Vivian nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "We thought we were protecting you, but we see now that we were really protecting ourselves. We were so afraid of losing you, of you feeling less ours somehow if you knew the truth." Lily absorbed their words, feeling the sincerity behind them. "I understand," she said slowly. I'm not angry with you. I'm just confused, scared. I don't know who I am anymore." "Oh, sweetheart," Vivian said, stroking Lily's hair. "You're you. You're our brilliant, compassionate, incredible daughter. Where you came from doesn't change who you are." Maxwell nodded in agreement. "Your birth parents may have given you life, Lily, but you've shaped that life yourself. Your kindness, your determination, your passion for helping others. Those are all you." Lily felt a small spark of warmth in her chest at their words. They were right, of course. She was still herself, still the girl who had helped build the community center, who had stood up in front of investors and fought for what she believed in. But there was still so much she didn't know, so many questions left unanswered. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "Elizabeth, she'll want to be part of my life, won't she?" "How does that work?" Maxwell and Vivian exchanged a glance. "That's up to you, sweetheart," Maxwell said gently. "We can't make that decision for you. But whatever you choose, we'll support you. If you want to get to know Elizabeth, we'll help make that happen." Vivian nodded, though Lily couldn't help but notice the flash of pain in her eyes. "We want you to have all the love in the world, Lily. If that includes Elizabeth, then we'll find a way to make it work." Lily felt a rush of gratitude for her parents, for their unconditional love, their willingness to put her needs first, even when it hurt them. She hugged them tighter, burying her face in Vivian's shoulder. "I love you," she murmured. "Both of you. That won't change, no matter what happens with Elizabeth." As the family held each other close, the storm of emotions began to settle. There were still many challenges ahead, many conversations to be had, and decisions to be made. But in that moment, surrounded by the love of the parents who had chosen her, Lily felt a glimmer of hope. She might not have all the answers yet, but she knew who she was at her core. She was Lily Thornton, daughter of Maxwell and Vivian, champion of the community center, friend to those in need. And no revelation, no matter how earth-shattering, could take that away from her. As the evening wore on, Lily found herself drawn to the window, gazing out at the familiar grounds of the Thornton estate. The world outside looked the same, but everything felt different. She was standing on the precipice of a new chapter in her life, one filled with unknowns and potential pitfalls. But as she turned back to look at her parents, still sitting on her bed, their love for her evident in every line of their faces, Lily felt a surge of determination. Whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family. The road ahead might be uncertain, but Lily knew one thing for sure: she was loved. And in the end, that was the only truth that really mattered. The days following Elizabeth's revelation passed in a haze of emotional conversations and sleepless nights. Lily found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions: curiosity about her birth mother, warring with loyalty to the parents who had raised her, excitement about discovering her roots tempered by fear of the unknown. One crisp morning, about a week after the meeting at the cafe, Lily sat at the kitchen table absently stirring a bowl of cereal that had long since gone soggy. Her mind was far away, imagining what Elizabeth might be doing at that very moment. Did she have the same morning routine? Did she take her coffee the same way Lily did? The sound of the doorbell jolted Lily from her reverie. She heard murmured voices in the foyer. Then Maxwell appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression a mixture of concern and resignation. "Lily," he said gently, "Elizabeth is here. She'd like to talk to you if you're feeling up to it." Lily's heart began to race. She had known this moment would come, had even been anticipating it. But now that it was here, she felt woefully unprepared. "It's okay if you're not ready," Maxwell added quickly, seeing the panic in Lily's eyes. "We can ask her to come back another time." Lily took a deep breath, steeling herself. "No," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. "No, I want to talk to her. I need to." Maxwell nodded, pride and worry warring in his eyes. "All right, sweetheart. We'll be right in the next room if you need us." As Elizabeth entered the kitchen, Lily was struck again by the strange familiarity of her features. It was like looking at a living mirror, showing her a possible future version of herself. "Hello, Lily," Elizabeth said softly, her voice warm but hesitant. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Lily gestured for Elizabeth to sit, buying herself a moment to gather her thoughts. I have so many questions," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know where to start." Elizabeth nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and regret. "I understand, and I promise I'll answer everything as honestly as I can. You deserve the truth, Lily. All of it." For the next hour, Lily listened as Elizabeth unfolded the story of her past. She learned of Elizabeth's young love affair with Lily's birth father, of the unexpected pregnancy that had thrown their lives into chaos. Elizabeth spoke of her fear and confusion, of the impossible choice she had faced as a scared teenager with no support system. "I thought I was doing the right thing," Elizabeth said, her voice choked with emotion. "Giving you to a family who could provide for you in ways I never could. But not a day has gone by that I haven't thought of you, wondered about you, loved you from afar." Lily absorbed it all in silence, her mind reeling with this new information. Part of her wanted to reach out, to comfort the obvious pain in Elizabeth's eyes. Another part held back, protective of the life and family she already had. "Why now?" Lily asked finally. "Why come back after all these years?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've spent years working on myself, Lily, getting my life together, dealing with the trauma and guilt of giving you up, and I realized I couldn't move forward, couldn't truly heal, without at least trying to make things right with you." She paused, her eyes searching Lily's face. "I want you to know that I'm not here to disrupt your life or take you away from your family. The Thorntons, they've given you a beautiful life, a life I could never have provided. I'm so grateful to them for that." Lily felt a knot in her chest loosen slightly at these words. "They're amazing," she said softly. "They've given me everything." Elizabeth nodded, a sad smile playing at her lips. "I can see that, and I want you to know, I respect that. I'm not here to replace them or compete with them. I hope that maybe there might be room in your life for me too, even if it's just as a friend." Lily considered this, turning the idea over in her mind. The thought of having Elizabeth in her life was both thrilling and terrifying. But as she looked at the woman before her, this stranger who was also in some fundamental way a part of her, Lily felt a pull she couldn't ignore. I think I'd like that," Lily said slowly. "To get to know you, I mean, but I need you to understand something." Elizabeth leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Of course, anything." Lily took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Maxwell and Vivian, now they're my parents, they always will be. Nothing will ever change that." Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I understand, Lily, and I respect that completely. I'm not here to take their place. I just want the chance to know you, to be a part of your life in whatever way you're comfortable with. As they continued to talk, Lily felt a strange sense of peace settling over her. There were still many questions to be answered, many bridges to be built, but for the first time since Elizabeth's revelation, Lily felt like she could see a way forward. When Maxwell and Vivian peeked into the kitchen an hour later, they found Lily and Elizabeth bent over a photo album, laughing softly at a picture of Lily's first attempt at riding a bike. "Mum, Dad," Lily called, noticing them in the doorway. "Come look at this." Elizabeth was just telling me about how clumsy she was as a kid too. Apparently it runs in the family. As Maxwell and Vivian joined them at the table, there was a moment of awkwardness, old hurts and new fears hanging in the air. But then Vivian reached out, placing her hand over Elizabeth's. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us the most precious gift in the world." Elizabeth's eyes welled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered back, "for giving her the life I couldn't." In that moment, as the four of them sat around the kitchen table, Lily felt a surge of love so powerful it almost took her breath away. She had been given an incredible gift, not one but two sets of parents who loved her beyond measure. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be awkward moments, difficult conversations, and complex emotions to navigate. But as Lily looked around at the faces of the people who loved her, her mother, her father, and the woman who had given her life, she knew that together they could face anything. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities and new beginnings. And Lily, surrounded by more love than she had ever dreamed possible, was ready to embrace it all. The weeks following Elizabeth's reappearance in Lily's life were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments for the entire Thornton family. As autumn gave way to winter, the community center became a haven of warmth and activity, a welcome distraction from the complexities of their personal lives. One chilly December afternoon, Lily stood at the center's front desk, sorting through a stack of donation forms for their holiday drive. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she entered data into the computer, a task that had become second nature to her over the past months. "Lily?" a familiar voice called, causing her to look up. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, a hesitant smile on her face. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Lily felt the now familiar flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach. Despite the progress they'd made, her relationship with Elizabeth was still new, still fragile. "Not at all," she said, gesturing for Elizabeth to come in. "What brings you here?" Elizabeth approached the desk, her eyes taking in the festive decorations adorning the center. "I was hoping to talk to you about something. Do you have a few minutes?" Lily nodded, curiosity piqued. They made their way to a quiet corner of the center, settling into comfortable chairs near a window overlooking the garden. "So," Lily began, "what's on your mind?" Elizabeth took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Lily. About my life, about our relationship, about what I want for the future." She paused, meeting Lily's eyes. "I've decided to move back to town permanently." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? That's... wow. Are you sure?" Elizabeth nodded, a mixture of determination and vulnerability in her expression. "I am. I know it won't be easy, and I know it might complicate things. But being here, getting to know you, it's made me realize how much I've been missing. Not just you, but a sense of purpose, of belonging." Lily absorbed this information, her mind racing with the implications. "What about your job? Your life back in the city?" "I've been offered a position at the local hospital," Elizabeth explained. "It's a step down from my current role, but it feels right. As for my life in the city, well, to be honest, there wasn't much holding me there." As Elizabeth continued to outline her plans, Lily found herself torn between excitement and apprehension. Having Elizabeth nearby would mean more opportunities to get to know her birth mother, to explore that part of her identity. But it also meant navigating a complex new family dynamic, one that still felt fragile and uncertain. "What do Mum and Dad think about this?" Lily asked, realizing even as she said it that she didn't know which set of parents Elizabeth had told first. A flicker of something, guilt, uncertainty, passed across Elizabeth's face. "I haven't told them yet," she admitted. "I wanted to talk to you first, to make sure you were comfortable with the idea before I made any final decisions." Lily felt a rush of warmth at this consideration. It was a small thing, perhaps, but it spoke volumes about Elizabeth's commitment to respecting her boundaries and her relationship with the Thorntons. "I appreciate that," Lily said softly. "And I think it could be good. Having you here, I mean. It won't be easy, but I'd like the chance to get to know you better." Elizabeth's face lit up with hope. "Really? Oh, Lily, that means so much to me. I promise I'll do everything I can to make this transition smooth for everyone." As they continued to talk, making tentative plans for the future, Lily found herself imagining what life might be like with Elizabeth as a regular presence. Family dinners with both sets of parents, holidays with an extra stocking on the mantel, having someone to turn to for advice who shared her genetic code. It was a dizzying prospect, but not an unwelcome one. Later that evening, as Lily helped Maxwell and Vivian prepare dinner, she broached the subject of Elizabeth's plans. To her surprise, her parents exchanged a knowing look. "Elizabeth called us this afternoon," Maxwell explained, his voice carefully neutral. "She wanted to discuss the possibility with us before making any final decisions." Lily felt a surge of relief, followed quickly by a twinge of guilt. "Oh, I didn't realize. How do you feel about it?" Vivian put down the knife she'd been using to chop vegetables, turning to face Lily fully. "Honestly, sweetheart, it's going to be an adjustment. But we've talked about it, and we think it could be a good thing for all of us." Maxwell nodded in agreement. "Elizabeth has made it clear that she respects our place in your life, and we respect her desire to be a part of it too. It won't always be easy, but we're committed to making it work." Lily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the love and understanding her parents were showing. She threw her arms around them both, holding them tight. "I love you guys so much," she murmured. "Thank you for being so amazing about all of this." As they finished preparing dinner, the conversation turned to practical matters, how to handle the holidays with Elizabeth in town, ideas for integrating her into their family traditions while still maintaining their own special bonds. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of awkwardness and uncertainty, but Lily felt a growing sense of excitement about the future. That night, as Lily lay in bed, her mind whirling with the day's events, she found herself thinking about the community center. In many ways, the center had been the catalyst for all the changes in her life, from her adoption by the Thorntons to the rekindling of her relationship with Elizabeth. An idea began to form in her mind, a way to bring together all the different threads of her life. With a smile, Lily reached for her notebook, jotting down ideas late into the night. Tomorrow, she decided, she would share her plan with her parents, all three of them. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead might be complicated, but it was also full of possibilities, and with the love and support of her ever-expanding family, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The future, once so uncertain, now stretched out before her like a blank canvas, ready to be filled with new memories, new relationships, and new adventures. And Lily, surrounded by more love than she had ever dreamed possible, was ready to paint that future in the brightest colors imaginable. The crisp winter air nipped at Lily's cheeks as she hurried up the steps of the community center, her arms laden with colorful posters and craft supplies. Today was the day she would present her big idea to her family, and excitement thrummed through her veins like electricity. As she pushed open the door, the warm air inside enveloped her like a hug. The center was alive with activity, as it always was these days. Children's laughter echoed from the playroom, while the soft murmur of adult voices drifted from the financial literacy class down the hall. Lily made her way to the conference room, where her parents, all three of them, were waiting. The sight of Maxwell, Vivian, and Elizabeth sitting together, engaged in polite if slightly awkward conversation, still felt surreal, but it also filled Lily with a sense of warmth and possibility. "There she is," Maxwell said, his face lighting up as Lily entered the room. "So we were starting to wonder if you'd gotten cold feet about this mysterious presentation of yours." Lily grinned, setting down her supplies on the table. "Never. I just wanted to make sure everything was perfect." As she began to set up, Lily couldn't help but observe the dynamics in the room. Vivian and Elizabeth sat on opposite sides of the table, both trying a bit too hard to appear relaxed. Maxwell, ever the peacemaker, sat between them, his easy smile a buffer against any tension. Taking a deep breath, Lily launched into her presentation. So, as you all know, the community center has become a huge part of my life. It's where I found my purpose, where I learned to believe in myself, and I think it could be the key to bringing our whole family together too. She unveiled a large poster board covered in colorful drawings and neatly written plans. I want to start a new program at the center. We'll call it Family Roots. It's going to be a series of workshops and activities designed to help families explore their histories, celebrate their unique stories, and build stronger bonds. As Lily outlined her vision, genealogy classes, storytelling workshops, art projects focused on family trees. She watched the expressions on her parents' faces change from polite interest to genuine excitement. The idea is to create a space where all kinds of families can come together, Lily explained, her voice growing more confident with each word. Adoptive families, blended families, single-parent families, everyone. We'll celebrate what makes each family unique and also what we all have in common. Elizabeth was the first to speak when Lily finished. Lily, it's incredible. You've really thought this through, haven't you? Lily nodded, a bit breathless from her presentation. I have, and I was hoping all of you might want to be involved. Mom, Dad, you've got so much experience running programs here at the center. And Elizabeth, with your medical background, maybe you could lead some workshops on genetic health history. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of Lily's proposal hanging in the air. Then, to everyone's surprise, Vivian stood up and walked around the table to hug Lily tightly. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "you never cease to amaze me. Of course we'll help. This is a beautiful idea." Maxwell nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, we can start planning right away. Maybe even launch the program in the spring." Elizabeth, who had been quiet until now, cleared her throat softly. "I'd be honored to be part of this, Lily. If everyone's comfortable with that, of course." Lily held her breath, looking between Vivian and Maxwell. This was the moment of truth. Would they be able to set aside their complicated history for the sake of this new venture? To her relief, Maxwell smiled warmly at Elizabeth. "We'd be glad to have you on board, Elizabeth. Your expertise would be invaluable." As the four of them began to discuss logistics, throwing out ideas and building on each other's suggestions, Lily felt a warmth bloom in her chest. This was what she had hoped for, her family, in all its complex, beautiful entirety, working together towards a common goal. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Lily threw herself into the project with characteristic enthusiasm, spending every spare moment at the center. She designed flyers, reached out to potential guest speakers, and even started learning about web design to create a dedicated website for the program. One evening, as Lily was putting the finishing touches on a promotional video for Family Roots, she heard a soft knock at the door of the computer lab. Looking up, she was surprised to see Richard Thornton standing in the doorway. "Uncle Richard," she said, rising to greet him. "What brings you here?" Richard looked uncharacteristically uncomfortable, his usual stern demeanor softened by what almost looked like nervousness. "I heard about your new program," he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. It's an impressive initiative." Lily beamed, pride swelling in her chest. "Thank you. We're really excited about it." Richard nodded, then seemed to steel himself for what he was about to say next. "I was wondering, that is, if you're open to it, I thought perhaps I might be able to contribute in some way. I have some experience with corporate sponsorship that could be useful in securing funding for the program." For a moment, Lily was too stunned to speak. Richard had always been a distant figure, more tolerated than welcomed in their family circle. His offer of help was unexpected, to say the least, but as she looked at her uncle, really looked at him, Lily saw something she'd never noticed before. A loneliness, a desire to connect that mirrored her own journey in many ways. "That would be wonderful, Uncle Richard," she said softly. "We'd be honored to have your help." The smile that broke across Richard's face was small but genuine. It was a start, Lily thought, another thread in the complex tapestry of her family. As the launch date for Family Roots approached, Lily found herself marveling at the changes in her life. The community center, once just a building, had become the heart of something much bigger. It was a place where families could grow and heal, where barriers could be broken down and new connections forged. And her own family, once defined by secrets and separation, was evolving into something beautiful and unique. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of tension, of uncertainty. But there was also laughter, understanding, and a deepening love that transcended biology and embraced the complex reality of their shared lives. On the night before the program's launch, Lily stood in the center's main hall, surrounded by the colorful displays and interactive exhibits they had created. Maxwell and Vivian were arranging chairs for the opening ceremony, while Elizabeth and Richard discussed sponsorship strategies in a corner. As Lily watched her family, her whole beautifully imperfect family, working together, she felt a sense of completion she had never known before. This was what she had been searching for all along, she realized. Not a perfect family, but a real one. One that faced challenges together, that grew and changed and loved fiercely through it all. Tomorrow they would open their doors and invite other families to join them on this journey of discovery and connection. But for now, in this quiet moment, Lily savored the knowledge that she had found her place in the world. She was Lily Thornton, daughter, friend, visionary, and she was loved wholly and completely by a family that defied definition, but exceeded her wildest dreams. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the windows, painting the room in warm golden hues, Lily smiled to herself. The future stretched out before her, full of possibilities and promise, and she was ready to embrace it all, with open arms and an open heart. The launch day of the Family Roots program dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring morning that seemed to mirror the excitement and hope bubbling within Lily. She arrived at the community center extra early, her arms laden with last-minute supplies and her mind racing with a mix of anticipation and nerves. As she pushed open the center's doors, Lily was greeted by a flurry of activity. Volunteers scurried about, hanging banners and arranging information booths. The air hummed with nervous energy and the scent of fresh coffee. "There's our star of the day!" Maxwell's voice boomed across the lobby. He strode towards Lily, enveloping her in a warm hug. "Are you ready for this, sweetheart?" Lily nodded, trying to quell the butterflies in her stomach. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Is everyone else here?" "Just about," Maxwell replied, guiding her towards the main hall. "Your mum's in the kitchen overseeing the catering. Elizabeth is setting up her health history workshop, and believe it or not, Richard's been here since dawn, making sure all the corporate sponsors' logos are displayed correctly." As they entered the hall, Lily's breath caught in her throat. The space had been transformed into a vibrant celebration of family and community. Colorful family trees adorned the walls, interactive displays invited visitors to explore their heritage, and a stage had been set up for guest speakers and performances. "It's perfect," Lily whispered, her eyes welling with tears of joy. "I can't believe we really did it." Maxwell squeezed her shoulder gently. "You did it, Lily. This was your vision. We just helped bring it to life." Before Lily could respond, Vivian appeared, looking harried but happy. "There you are. Lily, darling, we need you at the welcome booth. People are starting to arrive." The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions, explanations, and heartfelt conversations. Lily found herself at the center of it all, guiding families through the various activities, answering questions, and sharing her own story with anyone who asked. She watched with pride as Elizabeth led a packed workshop on understanding genetic health history, her medical expertise shining through as she patiently explained complex concepts in simple terms. Across the hall, Vivian and Maxwell tag-teamed a session on navigating the challenges of adoption, their honesty and vulnerability touching the hearts of many attendees. Even Richard seemed to be in his element, leading a seminar on financial planning for families that drew a surprisingly large and enthusiastic crowd. Lily couldn't help but smile at the sight of her usually stern uncle relaxing into his role, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth as he answered questions. As the day wore on, Lily found herself drawn into conversation after conversation with families from all walks of life. She listened to stories of long-lost relatives found through DNA testing, of step-families learning to blend and bond, of single parents building networks of support. One conversation in particular stood out. A young girl, no more than 10, approached Lily with wide, curious eyes. "Is it true that you have 2 mums and 2 dads?" she asked, her voice a mix of awe and confusion. Lily knelt down to the girl's level, smiling warmly. "In a way, yes," she replied. "I have the mom and dad who adopted me and raised me, and I have my birth mom who I'm getting to know now, and they're all important to me in different ways." The girl nodded solemnly. "I have two dads," she confided. "Sometimes kids at school say that's weird." "Well," Lily said, her voice gentle but firm, "I think families come in all shapes and sizes. What matters is that there's love, and it sounds like you have plenty of that." As the girl skipped away, a new spring in her step, Lily felt a warmth bloom in her chest. This was exactly why she had wanted to create this program, to help people see the beauty in all types of families, to foster understanding and acceptance. As the day drew to a close, Lily found herself on stage, addressing the crowd one last time. Looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many new, all connected now by this shared experience, she felt a surge of emotion. "Thank you all for being part of this incredible day," she began, her voice strong and clear. "When I first dreamed up the idea for Family Roots, I hoped it would be a way to bring people together, to celebrate the diversity of our families and the strength of our connections. But even in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined how powerful this experience would be." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd, landing on the faces of her family, Maxwell and Vivian beaming with pride, Elizabeth, her eyes shining with unshed tears, Richard, standing a bit apart but unmistakably part of the group. "My own family journey has been complicated," Lily continued with a soft laugh. "But it's taught me that family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about love, acceptance, and the choice we make every day to stand by each other. Whether you're here with your biological family, your adopted family, your chosen family, or any combination thereof, you are all part of something beautiful and important." As Lily concluded her speech to thunderous applause, she felt a sense of completion wash over her. This day, this program was more than just a success. It was a testament to the power of love and acceptance, a celebration of the complex, beautiful tapestry of human connections. Later that evening, as the last of the attendees trickled out and the cleanup began, Lily found a quiet moment to slip away. She made her way to the center's small garden, a peaceful oasis in the midst of the urban bustle. As she settled onto a bench, letting the events of the day wash over her, she heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, she saw Elizabeth, Maxwell, and Vivian making their way towards her. "Mind if we join you?" Vivian asked softly. Lily patted the bench beside her in invitation, and soon she found herself enveloped in the warmth of her family. For a long moment, they sat in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. "You know," Elizabeth said finally, her voice thoughtful, "when I first came back into your life, Lily, I was so focused on what I had missed, on trying to make up for lost time. But today I realize that what matters most is not the past, but the present and the future we're building together." Maxwell nodded, reaching out to squeeze Elizabeth's hand in a gesture of understanding. "We've all had to adjust, to redefine what family means. But I think we're stronger for it." Vivian leaned her head on Lily's shoulder, her voice soft but steady. "You've taught us all so much, sweetheart. About love, about forgiveness, about the true meaning of family." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Lily looked at the faces of her parents, all three of them, and felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy and there would undoubtedly be challenges ahead. But in this moment, surrounded by love and acceptance, Lily knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The Family Roots program was more than just a success. It was a new beginning, for Lily, for her family, and for countless others who had found connection and understanding within its embrace. As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Lily closed her eyes and made a silent wish that the roots they had nurtured today would continue to grow, strong and deep, supporting the dreams and hopes of families for years to come. As spring blossomed into summer, the success of the Family Roots program continued to ripple through the community. The Thornton Community Center had become a bustling hub of activity, with new families joining every week and the waiting list for workshops growing longer by the day. Lily stood at the center's front desk, leafing through a stack of thank you cards from program participants. Each note filled her with a sense of pride and purpose, reaffirming that the vision she had for bringing families together was making a real difference in people's lives. "Lily?" Maria's voice interrupted her reverie. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." Curious, Lily made her way to the lobby. A young woman stood there, nervously fidgeting with the strap of her bag. She couldn't have been more than a few years older than Lily herself. "Can I help you?" Lily asked, offering a warm smile. The woman looked up, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and apprehension. "Are you Lily Thornton, the one who started the Family Roots program?" Lily nodded, her curiosity growing. "I am." "And you are—" "My name is Sarah," the woman said, taking a deep breath as if steeling herself. "Sarah Collins, and I think I might be your sister." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Lily felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "I'm sorry," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you say sister?" Sarah nodded, her own voice trembling slightly. "A half-sister, technically. We share the same father. I only found out recently when I saw the news about your program, saw your picture. I knew I had to come." Lily's mind raced. A sister. Another piece of her biological family she had never known existed. She thought of Elizabeth, of the complicated journey they had been on to build a relationship. And now here was another link to her past, standing right in front of her. "I'm so sorry to spring this on you like this," Sarah was saying, her words tumbling out in a rush. "I debated for weeks whether to come. I don't want to disrupt your life. But after everything I read about family roots, about embracing all kinds of family connections, I hoped maybe you'd be open to talking." Lily took a deep breath, centering herself. This was exactly the kind of situation her program was designed to help with. She couldn't very well turn away now. "Of course," she said, managing a small smile. "Why don't we go somewhere more private to talk?" As they settled into the center's cozy meeting room, Lily sent a quick text to Maxwell and Vivian, asking them to come to the center as soon as possible. Then, turning her full attention to Sarah, she said, "So, tell me everything." Over the next hour, Sarah shared her story. She had grown up with her mother, never knowing her father's identity. It was only after her mother's recent passing that she had discovered a cache of old letters that revealed the truth of her parentage. Curious about her biological father and any potential siblings, she had done some digging online, which had led her to Lily and the Family Roots program. "I don't expect anything," Sarah said earnestly. I wanted to know where I came from, to understand that part of myself. And when I saw what you were doing here, how you were helping other families connect and heal, I thought maybe we could at least talk." Lily listened, her heart aching for this woman who had lived her whole life not knowing half of her heritage. She thought of her own journey, of the pain and joy that had come with discovering her biological roots. "Sarah," she said softly, reaching out to take the other woman's hand. "I'm so glad you came. I can't pretend this isn't a shock, but I'm truly happy to meet you." The relief on Sarah's face was palpable. "Really? You're not angry or upset?" Lily shook her head, a small laugh escaping her. "Believe me, I understand better than most how complicated family can be. This program, it's taught me that family is what we make of it. Biology is just the beginning." As they continued to talk, sharing stories and discovering commonalities, Lily felt a sense of wonder wash over her. Here was yet another thread in the tapestry of her family, another connection she never could have imagined. When Maxwell and Vivian arrived, slightly out of breath and wearing matching expressions of concern, Lily introduced them to Sarah with a mix of nerves and excitement. To her relief and pride, her parents embraced the situation with the same openness and love they had shown throughout Lily's journey. Vivian immediately insisted that Sarah join them for dinner, while Maxwell began regaling her with embarrassing stories from Lily's childhood, much to Lily's mock dismay. As the day wore on, more of the family trickled in. Elizabeth arrived, her eyes wide with shock as she was introduced to Sarah. There were tears and hugs, apologies for past mistakes and promises to do better in the future. Even Richard made an appearance, his usual gruff demeanor softening as he observed the expanding family circle. "Well," he said, a hint of a smile playing at his lips, "I suppose we'll need to order a bigger turkey for Thanksgiving this year." That evening, as the extended Thornton clan gathered around the dinner table, a mismatched group bound together by love, choice, and now, an ever-expanding web of biological connections, Lily felt a sense of completion she had never known before. Looking around at the faces of her family, Maxwell and Vivian, who had chosen her and given her a home, Elizabeth, who had found the courage to reconnect and build a new relationship, Richard, slowly but surely becoming a true part of the family, and now Sarah, a new sister to get to know and love. Lily felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This, she realized, was what family roots was all about. Not just uncovering biological connections or celebrating traditional family structures, but embracing the beautiful, messy, complex reality of what family could be. As the conversation flowed around her, filled with laughter and the occasional happy tear, Lily found herself thinking back to that day in the park, when Maxwell had found her, a lost, lonely girl with no place to call home. She could never have imagined then the journey that lay ahead, the love and belonging she would find, the family she would build. The road hadn't always been easy. There had been hurt and misunderstandings, secrets revealed and trust rebuilt. But every step of the way, every challenge faced and overcome, had led to this moment. A moment of pure, unconditional love and acceptance. As the evening drew to a close, Lily stood to make a toast. Raising her glass, she looked around at the faces of her family, all of her family, and felt her heart swell with love. "To roots," she said, her voice strong and clear. "The ones we're born with, the ones we choose, and the ones we nurture together. And to the beautiful ever-growing tree of family that springs from those roots." As glasses clinked and voices echoed her toast, Lily knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, she would face them with the strength and love of her family behind her. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter in a park had come full circle, leading her to a place of belonging more profound and beautiful than she could ever have imagined. In the warmth of that moment, surrounded by love and acceptance, Lily Thornton was home. Truly, completely home.